Good evening, everybody. I'd like to welcome members and the public to this evening's meeting of the City Council. I will ask my chaplain to open the meeting.
Good evening, everyone. On Monday, I returned from a week's holiday only to go straight off to some National Committee work for 2 days. So it was only this morning that I returned to my email inbox after 10 days. You'll know the feeling of trepidation and disappointment when you see how much is in there. Amongst those emails was one from a charity, Action for Children, a new report they'd published on childhood. The report is subtitled Building a Brighter Future for Our Children. At first it did nothing to lift my spirits. A survey revealed that 19% of 14-year-olds were worried about their mental health. 53% of 18-year-olds were worried about their mental health. My mood did not lift. But then I was drawn to a section on the history of this particular charity, which has some links historically with the Methodist Church whom I serve. In 1869, Thomas, a young Methodist minister, discovered 2 boys under the bridge at Waterloo in London. And he found them somewhere safe to live and some adults who would care for them for their future. Those boys were named Fred and George. And remarkably, there is a photograph of Fred and George as young boys, and so that I could see what they looked like. As I looked at that photo, my mood began to lift because I was inspired by the fact that from their vulnerability and their desperation, somebody responded and gave them a brighter future. Inspired that there were people then, as there are people now, like yourself perhaps, who look at the world around them and have a sense of wonder and the potential that they can see. Why am I sharing this with you? Simply, it's that word wonder. The word wonder. As we look around at the issues of our age, at the issues in our city, as we think about our debating and our discussing and our disagreeing and our compromising, all of our emails and messages and workload, it's easy to lose a sense of wonder at the potential of every human being around us. That wonder is precious to us. Will you forgive me for a moment if I share with you the words of a children's song, one I sometimes use in church or school assemblies, and it's called The Wonder of These Days, written by a group called Fishy Music based in Edinburgh. I'll spare you the singing, but I'll read you the words of the chorus. All the miracles around us. In fact, I'll do the actions and I'll have to shout. All the miracles around us, all the secrets that surround us, there is glory to astound us. Oh, the wonder of these days. I invite you to take a moment to reflect on the word wonder as you prepare to begin your business this evening. A moment of quiet reflection on the wonder of these days. Such a mystery is this world, all its mountains and its creatures. From the eagle to the sparrow, this great world has much to teach us. On that day when love is first and the world is done with hating, as we gather on the mountain where our hopes and dreams are waiting. Oh, the wonder of these days, all the miracles around us, all the secrets that surround us. There is glory to astound us. Oh, the wonder of these days.
Thank you very much, Ian. I like the hand signals. They're very good. Okay, we are not expecting a fire alarm to go off. If it does, please exit at the back or the front of the council chamber or the rear of the public gallery and follow the exit signs. For wheelchair users and those with mobility issues, please make your way to the safe waiting area on the Pease Hill side stairwell. Council officers will be on hand to assist. An accessible unisex toilet is located outside the council chamber opposite the members' room. A drinks machine and water dispenser are located in the corridor opposite committee room 1. The council is live streaming and recording this meeting, and a copy will be available to view in the coming days. Can councillors speak into their microphones so that everyone can hear their contributions that are made? And can I ask all councillors to be concise with their contributions and to show respect to their fellow members? Can we now go to our agenda item 1? Can I approve the minutes of the meeting of the council held on the 22nd of May, which is found on pages 7 to 32 in your information pack? Agreed? Okay, thank you. Do we have any apologies? No? Okay, thank you.
Councillor Pagecroft
Councillor
and
Pagecroft.
Chadwick.
Okay. Thank you. I also...
Mayor, Councillor McPherson.
Yes, I was just going to say that one. Okay. Yeah, okay. And I did have apologies from Councillor Martinella, who's going to be late, but you're here, so that's okay. Okay. I've had a busy and most enjoyable start to my mayoral year. I'd like to highlight several particular enjoyable events which I was honoured to be invited to. The Arbury Carnival, the Chesterton Festival, the Dragon Boat Festival, the Abbey People lunch, and also last night I was with the Brownies, so that was real fun. It's a privilege to be part of so many events in our wonderful city. And I'm also privileged to be received by Her Majesty the Queen on her visit to Niab Park Farm. Members are already aware that the annual Mayor's Day Out to Great Yarmouth takes place on Tuesday the 13th of August. If you're interested in volunteering your service to assist on the day, but have not yet let the organisers know, please can you let Penny Jackson know by the end of this week. Members will want to acknowledge with me that Antoinette has been in the post at the City Council Chief Executive for 10 years, and having started with the Council on the 5th of July 1999. I believe group leaders wish to say a few words in recognition for this achievement.
Thank you, Mayor. It is a great privilege to have this opportunity. It's not often people get thanked halfway, so I hope that Antoinette takes this as a sort of half-time thank you. So the Council will shortly, Mayor, be paying tribute to a whole range of people who serve us so well. And we often, and probably not often enough in this chamber, thank our staff. But we are very fortunate in the staff that we've got. And there'll be many that will be rewarded in a small token for the fact that they've served us for 20, 30 or even 40 years shortly. And among them are not... in some ways singling out Antoinette, but I do think it's appropriate, given the contribution that Antoinette's made, that we are grateful, Antoinette, to have you serving as our Chief Executive. That has been for 10 years, and that was in addition to a further 10 years of outstanding contributions before that. So we'd just certainly like to thank you for your leadership, for your principles, for the care that you show for people, particularly our staff, but also for the many residents that contact you. That in the process of your work, you have both made major changes to ensure that this council better meets the needs of the city. But particularly, you have opened up partnerships and just the opportunity of delivering things for Cambridge by working with others. And so we just like to say thank you. Looking forward, you've already survived or are surviving the fourth of 4 leaders. We will shortly have 4 prime ministers during your period as leader. And we look forward to you outlasting a lot more. So thank you, Antoinette.
Councillor Bick.
Thank you, Mayor. I too would like to congratulate Antoinette. 10 years at the top of any organisation these days demonstrates 2 important things. One, that the person concerned must be doing a good deal that's right, and the second, that the person concerned must be enjoying it. And I'm not going to pause very long on the council evening, which I know is Antoinette's real favourite evening of the year, for her to confirm or otherwise on that point. But in the case of the City Council, ourselves as an organisation, I think we should add 2 other factors. One is the ability to stay fresh, and the other is the capacity to thrive on change. We on this side are grateful for all the work that she's doing for us, whether it's responding to sudden crises like the fire in Mill Road, which I found her doing this week, supporting things like the negotiation of the city deal, brokering complicated arrangements like for the Tour de France a few years ago, or the really, really vital business of writing letters to MPs or government ministers, which is really the meat and drink of the work of this council. Or whether she's in any of those things simply guiding other officers to do things on our behalf. And I think there is a lot of that happens in a very healthy way. As Lewis has said, Antoinette's 10 years as Chief Executive, we didn't exactly say this, occurs at a key moment because she's shown remarkable even-handedness in serving precisely 5 years supporting a Liberal Democrat majority administration and 5 years supporting a Labour majority administration. And I'm sure that all members will be as keen as I am that in Antoinette's own interests, quite apart from any other factors, that we all assist her in maintaining that balance next year. Thank you.
We now have a presentation from our leader and, Councillor McGurty for Antoinette. I'd also like to say thank you, Antoinette, because you've always been there if we've got any worries or we need some advice. So, as a councillor, I would like to say thank you very much. Okay, declarations of interest. I would like to ask members to declare if they have any interest in the items on the agenda before us this evening. Members are reminded that they can declare interest at any time during the meeting or anything occurs to them during the debate tonight. Is there any declarations? Councillor Kentrow?
Madam Mayor, I'm a trustee of Winter Comfort for the Homeless.
Councillor Massey?
Madam Mayor, I fundraise for each.
My partner works for Willow Walk Shelter.
Item 6C relates to my employer, so I won't vote for that one.
Okay.
I'm a trustee at Centre 33 and my partner works for the County Council.
Lovely, thank you very much. We now go on to agenda item 3. I understand that I have Naomi Bennett and Dave Fox here. Is that correct? Lovely. Who wish to address the meeting. Under the scheme allowing members of the public to speak at council meetings, each speaker must address their comments to the chair of the relevant committee or the relevant member of the exec. Each question or statement must be limited to 3 minutes, with a further 2 minutes for a supplementary question or a comment on something that has been said. Regarding speaking contributions, just to remind members of the public, I will ring the bell when you have half a minute left and will ring it again when your time is up. There is normally an overall time limit for public questions of 30 minutes, including the time taken by responses of questions, but this can be extended by my discretion. Can't get it. Would Naomi Bennett please come forward and ask her question?
Good evening. Can everybody hear me? Good. Our Green Party resident survey of Abbey Ward shows that over 98% of residents are opposed to the proposed Easy Hotel on Newmarket Road. There are already 2 budget hotels opposite the site, and we understand that Anglian House is not capacity and that rooms are likely to appear on Airbnb shortly. In addition, we understand there are hotel developments potentially for East Road, Shire Hall and Park Street. When is this too many hotels? I understand the council plan says that there is only a shortage of rooms in the super luxe category and certainly no shortage in the budget capacity. Residents would prefer a mixed scheme with ground level cafes and shops and new homes above. Councillor Cantrill pointed out at the last meeting that there are 2,500 households in Cambridge on the housing register waiting for social housing. Why can't we build flats on this brownfield site rather than on the St Albans green space in Arbury? It would be a great site for retirement housing because it's a location that would allow older people to retain their independence for longer. Thank you.
Councillor Johnson.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I'm going to thank you very much for your question. I'm going to answer on behalf of my colleague, Councillor Katie Thornborough, and myself as the Executive Councillor for Housing. Before I do so, however, I should point out, as a Abbey councillor, myself, Councillor Davies and Massey have worked with residents against the Easy Hotel application, and we're pleased that the Planning Committee were minded to refuse that application most recently. Now here comes the policy question, answer. The role of the Council as local planning authority in this matter is to consider the planning application submitted to it. The Planning Committee's role is to determine if the application for the hotel is in compliance with the development plan having regard to other material planning considerations. If the committee determines that the hotel would result in an unacceptable level of harm, having again regard to the development plan and other material planning considerations, it should refuse the planning application and give clear planning reasons for doing so. As part of its consideration, however, the committee should not take into account what it might prefer to see on the site, i.e. any alternative type of development, including affordable housing. To do so would go beyond an assessment of the merits of the proposal itself, and any reason for refusal on this basis would be invalid and could not be sustained at appeal. In terms of council housing, the council is committed to developing 500 new council rented homes in the city. It is primarily focused on opportunities for redevelopment of its own sites for the purpose of sites where appropriate on the open market. Arbury and King's Hedges are known as areas of high need for housing. The council are reviewing the design of the proposed scheme in terms of the use and the improvements of the open space at the Meadows site. The council does not own the site proposed for the Easy Hotel.
Thank you.
Would you like a supplementary question? Would you like to ask anything else?
No, I'm going to hand over to Dave Fox to ask his question, and then I've got
If you've got one more question, you need to say it now.
Okay. Will the council release a regular air pollution map to help raise residents' awareness?
Sorry, my fault. It's all right. You can say your question, your second question in a minute. Okay, thank you. Sorry. So, Mr. Fox.
My question is to the Executive Councillor for Climate Change, Environment and the City Centre. I want to see an official, regular, car-free day in Cambridge. Cities across the world do this, and London will be doing it again on September the 22nd. We all know that we must reduce pollution in our city centre, and we must move quickly to a low-carbon transport system with more and better public transport, replacing the stranglehold of congestion from private cars in our city. As Extinction Rebellion showed on the 6th of July, car-free streets in Cambridge bring cleaner air and welcome safe space to pedestrians and cyclists. An official car-free day would show many more people how lovely our city centre streets could be. Over 1,000 cities now have a regular event of this sort, so why not Cambridge? Does this council back this call for Cambridge's own car-free day this September? Will you renew your call on the Cambridgeshire County Council and other local authorities to stop obstructing and make this happen?
Thank you. Yes, I agree wholeheartedly. I personally support an organised car-free day. I've been trying to get the County Council to agree to one. There's also been a separate organisation or a group got together. They also tried to organise one, but the County Council are the Highways Authority. They are the ones that need to agree to close the roads, and unfortunately up till now they have not agreed to do that. You ask, does this council support a car-free day? I can't quite say yes, the council does, because we haven't had a vote on it in this chamber. However, the Labour group did have a vote on it just over a year ago, so the Labour group do support having car-free days, organised car-free days in Cambridge. We can... So I was going to say, we're the majority group, so you can infer, but obviously they also support one. So there you go, you've got your answer. Will I call on Cambs County to stop obstructing? I have been doing that for a couple of years. Since the Extinction Rebellion road closures, I have emailed the chair of Highways. His reply was not exactly brimming with support. However, he did agree that he would take it to his group and agreed to my suggestion that he and I could meet to discuss it again. Just to say, obviously at the City Council we measure air quality. So during the hours that Extinction Rebellion closed the roads, nitrogen dioxide levels were cut by 65% in the morning, so before Regent Street was closed to traffic, and then by 85% in the afternoon when the measures were in full swing. So air pollution does fluctuate depending on what's on in the city and also due to the weather. However, 65% or 61 and 80% reduction is something that I don't think we can ignore, and if people weren't sure whether cutting the number of cars in the city would improve air pollution, we now have quite clear evidence. And I would just say the main effect of breathing in that nitrogen dioxide is an increased likelihood of respiratory problems by inflaming the lungs, so children with asthma and older people with heart conditions are most at risk for it. Now, I'd just like to say I really support an organised car-free day. There were some issues around the protests. A couple of the businesses, namely the hotels, staff struggled to get to work. But other than that, the Fitzwilliam had a good day. Footfall was up in the Grand Arcade, which Extinction Rebellion might not see quite as a positive. But obviously getting businesses on board to agree to it. I also think that people might have been put off coming to the city by it being called a protest, whereas if we had an organised car-free day, we could have more things in the streets, stalls and events. So yes, we support a car-free day, and I would be happy to work with you to try and achieve it.
Thank you. Mr Fox, would you like to do a supplementary?
Yeah, thank you, Rosie. It's great to hear those numbers about pollution, even the footfall up. Certainly an organised car-free day could be better in at least 3 ways, it seems to me. Firstly, better publicity so that more drivers were aware that they shouldn't try and bring their cars in. Additionally, that I think access for disabled people is one particular thing that we'd like to sort out. The police did advise us that it wasn't safe to do it in the way that we had our event on the 6th of July, but I know many of us, all of us, actually felt very uneasy about that. So that needs sorting. So yeah, it could be much better, and perhaps public transport, more buses, free buses, why not? And since we all agree now, don't we, that a car-free day would be a great idea, that's unanimous, I think. How about calling for an even more regular car-free day? If it makes sense once a year, if we go ahead in September and it works well, why not call for a weekly car-free day? Let's have Tuesdays without cars coming in. It has to be regular so that people know when it is. So yeah, I'm going to go to the county council and ask them yet again to make this happen. And can I take it that I have the full support of the whole of Cambridge City Council in asking for this? Thank you very much.
And you've got 3 minutes again. Okay.
Again, this comes out of our Green Party resident survey. Resident awareness of air pollution and the problems it brings is really very low. And this, I think, is going to be a factor that will hold back some of the solutions that the council wants to see. So will the council release a regular air pollution map to help raise resident awareness? This would be particularly helpful for schools trying to get support for no drop-off and no idling policies, and it would also help residents to make more informed choices about their travel.
So I've got quite a long technical answer. The City Council's Environmental Quality and Growth team do periodically produce detailed mapped contour plots of pollutants of concern, nitrogen dioxide and PM10 particulate matter. However, such mapping is not a simple process and requires some months of work to produce. Usually they're produced to support reporting to central government every 3 years or as part of supporting evidence for a major policy initiative. Modelling is usually carried out for a full year in arrears, and the most recent baseline maps were produced for the year 2017 in support of feasibility work for a clean air zone. A further baseline modelling exercise for 2018 will be completed this summer, for which mapping of pollution contours will be available later in the year. It is unfortunately not practical to provide detailed mapping of pollution contours on a frequency compatible with the request due to the time involved and the cost of carrying out the work. Alongside periodic modelling exercises, nitrogen dioxide and particulate matter is monitored continuously at 5 fixed locations in the city, and the unratified data is available live on our website. A further 70 passive diffusion tubes provide monthly data for nitrogen dioxide, and the locations of those sites are available on the City Council's air quality web pages, with the data published annually. Up-to-date but unratified data is available on request from the air quality team. The Environmental Quality and Growth team are currently carrying out a trial of smaller deployable air quality monitoring units as part of a study of the closure of Mill Road Railway Bridge. If the trial is successful and the data collected reasonably accurate, it may be possible to redeploy some units at key locations like schools to give live information on air quality through a web portal if future resources support this. In terms of making travel decisions, whilst absolute pollutant concentrations vary considerably from day to day due to weather conditions and traffic flows, the areas which suffer the poorest air quality are reasonably identified by the periodic mapping modelling work carried out. Generally speaking, to minimise exposure when walking or cycling, residents should aim to avoid the most heavily trafficked roads, in particular junctions on the Inner Ring Road, the bus station area, and junctions on the main feeder road. Air quality is generally below national health-based objectives across the majority of the city and is good compared to many larger cities. The latest annual status report, also available on our website, shows compliance with these standards at all of our monitoring sites in 2018 for the first time since monitoring began in the city. However, it is important that we continue to work to reduce levels further to keep pace with growth of the city and continue to improve health outcomes.
Thank you.
Okay, would you like a supplementary?
No, thank you.
Okay, thank you very much. Can we now go on to agenda item 4? We now turn to page item 4A on page 7 to 27, recommendations of the Executive Councillor for Housing concerning 2018-19 review and capital outturn carry forwards and significant variance. Housing revenue account. Does Councillor Johnson wish to introduce this item?
Thank you.
Can I just say you have 5 minutes to introduce this, okay?
We won't need 1 minute. This item is requesting that Council approve the carry forward request for capital expenditure as part of the Housing Investment Plan. Information relating to how the overall figure was arrived at can be found in Appendix D of the report which went to Housing Scrutiny Committee, published here, and the notes which accompany it.
That was quick. Is there any debate? Councillor Cantrell.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Madam Mayor, in my view, the value we place on our council tenants is most explicitly expressed in how we maintain the properties they live in, their homes. And it's for this reason that the HRA outturn is deeply worrying in relation to the amount of money we spend on repair and maintenance of our council housing stock. And as some members are aware, I've raised this issue before in this chamber regarding the HRA and the outturn, and the numbers speak for themselves. So even taking this year's outturn into account, what we have seen is that over the last 4 years, there's a cumulative underspend. That's a cumulative underspend, even taking carry forwards into account, of over £500,000 in the housing revenue account for repairs and maintenance. That's £500,000. That's £500,000 not spent on fixing people, £500,000 not spent on fixing people's doors, people's windows, and other repairs that may seem small to some people in this chamber, but actually make a material difference to the way in which our tenants live and the quality of their life. The fact that in order to get a grip on this issue, the Executive Councillor for Housing is being forced to undertake a review of the repairs and maintenance service illustrates, Madam Mayor, illustrates how it's completely out of control. It's out of control, this vital service that we provide to residents. Now, Madam Mayor, the consequences of this service being out of control is not just expressed in figures, but it's felt by the tenants themselves. As all members most probably saw, the recent article in the Cambridge News of a tenant who spent 3 months trying to get the council to fix a hole in the ceiling of their bathroom. Madam Mayor, as I said at the start of my speech, the value we place on our council tenants is reflected by the way we look after their homes. Evidence would suggest, Madam Mayor, that the ruling group fall well short of the value that we should be placing on our council tenants, and they need to pull their socks up, and pull their socks up soon. Thank you, Madam Mayor.
Councillor Porra? You've got 3 minutes, okay?
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I just wanted to ask the Executive Councillor whether, one of the things I noticed is we've got quite a lot of underspend because we've got staffing vacancies, and we've also obviously then got the overspends when we've had to bring contractors in and subcontractors to cover the work. I notice it's in various appendices for this item, so on page 18, 19, 20, but also does kind of pop up later in some of the other appendices with other accounts. Obviously, I appreciate that when office, as we know, we have vacancies, people are promoted, which is great. Sometimes people are unwell, but at the moment, there does seem to be this extra cost where we're backfilling posts with contractors. I know we all agree that the officers at Cambridge City Council are highly skilled and very valued by all of us, I'm sure. And like any good organisation, we value the institutional memory and the skills of our staff. So I wondered if the Executive Councillor could confirm whether what he's planning to do kind of to improve the recruitment and the retention so that costs can be more stable over time. And personally, I'd love to encourage things like flexible working, things like job sharing, part-time posts, that maybe would allow a sort of more diversity of applicants from within and outside the Cambridge City to join the staff. Thanks, Madam Mayor. Thank you very much.
Do I have anybody else? No? Okay. Oh, Councillor Ashton?
I've got to say, I find it amazing how we get accused of things when the party opposite put out our contractors, sent it out to other people to do. And in my ward, we had contractors being paid to put fences up that were never put up. So maybe one way we could get rid of this deficit is to pay contractors when they don't do things as well. And when we talk about look after our residents, who we value so dearly, I'd like to remind the opposition, they were the party who evicted old-age pensioners from the bungalows, who've been in there for 20 and 30 years without any consultation. So when we're talking about looking after residents, think about what you're saying.
Okay, nobody else? Okay. Yeah. Councillor Pippas?
I just also like to add another example. We have got somebody in Queen Edith. She has a disabled child, lives in a council house, and her door cannot open or when it's closed. She cannot take her child out, which is disabled. I have asked in April for the door to be repaired, and nothing has happened. Are we being penny wise, pound stupid? These people need us, please.
No? Okay. Councillor Johnson, you have 5 minutes.
It's amazing, isn't it? You know, I was at Housing Scrutiny Committee and there was absolutely didn't hear a squeak, didn't hear a peep from the Lib Dems on this. It just so happens that in this arena, all the rhetoric comes out, spewing out, absolutely, okay, thank you. I do not reckon, okay, it is clear that, you know, there are some issues in, it is clear that there are some issues in respect of assets and in terms of our estates and maintenance, and that's why there is a review that's going to be undertaken. But I do not recognise I don't recognise this vision that has been presented by Councillor Cantrell of a service which is basically being unfit for purpose. We are looking at several aspects of our estates management to try and ensure that we can deliver the best services for our tenants. I think we're all agreed on that. So that's what I'm going to say on that matter. In respect of contractors, that is, again, part of the review that will be taking place. And Councillor Pippas, if you wish to, you can email me, and if you have, in respect of the specific issue that your constituent has encountered. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Okay, we'll go to the vote. Please, can I see those in favour of the recommendation?
Okay, that's 24.
And those against? And abstentions?
Okay, that's 13 abstentions.
Thank you. We now turn to agenda item 4B on page 29 to 55, recommendations of the Executive Councillor for Housing concerning new build housing, Camkin Road, Executive Councillor for Housing. Does Councillor Johnson wish to introduce this item?
Madam Mayor, this item is coming before Council following it also being tabled, discussed and voted at the most recent Housing Scrutiny Committee. Due to a change in the budget allocated for this project as previously specified in the HRA BSR earlier this year. When the budget setting report was being put together late last year and early this year, officers arrived at a figure which was based on early work completed on the project. Since then, further work has taken place as a consequence of additional design considerations, including abiding by regulatory requirements for lifts, and also to ensure that we can maximise the number of new homes delivered within the site footprint available. With respect to the project itself, the Camkin Road scheme will deliver 75 new homes, up from the previous figure of 73, a net gain of 50 homes on that site, which is presently on that site. The existing homes are in a poor condition and are small. Residents are aware of the proposals to redevelop, and we have appointed a decanted rehousing officer who will work specifically and individually with the residents to find them a new home, and they will be offered the right to return under our homeless policy. In terms of sustainability, as with all our new build council house schemes being delivered under the Cambridge Investment Partnership or in-house, it will meet our Sustainable Housing Guide introduced in 2017. We will also look to utilise findings of the Pollard Thomas Edwards Architects Commissioned Review of the Sustainability Scheme Standards Applied at Viredo in Trumpington, which has looked at how well the sustainability features have performed in reducing emissions and saving energy. Full details of the approach to the design of the scheme will be set out at the planning stage and public consultation. This is the last scheme being brought forward in the current council house building programme and will allow us to meet and exceed our target of 500 new council homes delivered by 2022, with the current projection being that a total of 537 will be completed.
Thank you. Is there a spokes? Councillor Cantrell, you have 5 minutes.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. So, Madam Mayor, I'm on public record on numerous occasions supporting the construction of the 500 council houses. With a housing register of 2,500 households, as the public speaker mentioned, those 500 houses will go some way to address the chronic housing crisis that we face. But it was Councillor Collis's social media post of the Guardian article on Norwich City Council's housing scheme, 100 homes on Goldsmith Street, that reminded me that as a local authority, we can do much more than just deliver 500 council homes. We could, for example, like Norwich, deliver the housing using a company wholly owned by the council, rather than putting 17.5% profit in the pockets of a commercial property developer. But the scheme on Camkin Road illustrates another important point, because unlike Norwich, where the council houses were built on a total passive basis, the ruling group's ambition to date on Camkin Road, like the other sites for the 500 houses, is at best muted when it comes to sustainability. And I note the Executive Councillor for Housing's comment this evening in terms of exploring possible options. But we're told that the best scheme that will achieve a level of, at best, the scheme will achieve a level of sustainability somewhere between Code 4 to 5. The question I ask is why the ruling group is not insisting that the Camkin Road scheme is Code 5, fully passive, embracing full sustainable building techniques, such as structural timber frame that reduces materially the amount of embedded carbon in the construction. In scrutiny, in response to a tenant representative's question on this, officers indicated that they could possibly look at a pilot scheme of this nature. The question I ask is, why do we need a pilot scheme? We don't even have to go to Norwich to look at a passive scheme. We only need to look barely half a mile away at Marmalade Lane, where we have used sustainable construction techniques to deliver passive housing on a mass housing basis. Building passive housing schemes on Campkin Road would not just benefit the climate, it would also put money back in the pockets of our tenants. In Norwich, in the Norwich scheme, tenants pay on average £150 a year for energy. The sense I have is that the ruling group talks warm words when it comes to climate change, but fails to deliver in a tangible way. So instead of developing a scheme in Cambridge, instead of aspiring to develop a scheme in Cambridge, as Councillor Collis's tweet suggests, why doesn't the Executive Councillor for Housing actually deliver on the ruling group's words and give a commitment in this chamber this evening to the public that Campkin Road will be an exemplar passive scheme, one that is delivered in Councillor Collis's own ward? Thank you, Madam Mayor.
Okay, I've got Councillor Price for the debate.
Oh, yes, thank you, Madam Mayor. Yes, Councillor Cantrell is always in favour of building the 500 council houses until it comes to building them, and then he's very much opposed to them. So if we want to talk weasel words, Councillor Cantrell, we do that. Listen, as a ward councillor for King's Hedges and former executive councillor for housing, when we took control of the city council, we put a stop to the redevelopment of this, what was originally Campkin Road Phase 2, because it formed part of the previous ruling group's redevelopment programme, which, as you've already heard earlier, was so appallingly done in terms of treatment of tenants, in terms of the people that were used to build the homes, for which I think you'll find that we still suffer. This scheme is a vast, vast improvement on anything that was built by Keepmoat. We use the Cambridge Sustainability Housing Guide. It's a guide that has been widely acclaimed. I had leaders and housing people from other councils ask if they could use it because they felt it was so good. I understand it's not in Councillor Cantrell's interests to promote the work that the Labour Council is doing. I get that, but every so often it would be helpful if he was to were to support it. We're building houses to house some of the 2,500 people that he speaks of because we think they should be housed. We're not spending our time talking about it and then objecting to it. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Pora?
Oh, thank you. Yeah. I have it's not a minor, it's a minor point, but it's quite an important issue. Having been to housing scrutiny for the first time, obviously, because I'm a new councillor, I noticed that we've now got evidence that a lot of our tenants who are decanted under the home loss policy, I don't think are coming back. So I was having a look at why that might be, because obviously you'd assume a lot of people would want to return to the community they've been part of for quite a while. So I wondered if we might be able to have a look at the home loss policy, and in particular 4.3 on, I think it is page 51, should anyone want to look at it. At the moment, if a tenant moves out and then decides not to come back, they get £6,300 thereabouts as a kind of relocation allowance. But the tenants who come back, who've previously been on a lower rent, have to come back at the higher rent, and there's no sort of accommodation for that under these regulations. And it did strike me that this is perhaps why we're not getting people returning. So I wondered if I could ask if the Executive Councillor might be able to consider that and see whether this is somewhere where we might be able to make a difference to some people who would like to come back. And I don't anticipate there being a financial loss to the council in doing that, because obviously at the moment we're paying £6,300 for every person who doesn't come back. So I wondered if that would be something you might consider to give our tenants a choice as to where they want to live when we do rebuild or refurbish. Thank you, Madam Mayor.
Councillor Ashton?
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I'd like to congratulate our Executive Councillor on being humane and letting our residents move back to the properties they lived in before if they choose to. We don't force people to move back, unlike the opposition, who, when they were in power, told the residents who've been in their properties for over 30 years. I'm sorry, but you're moving out and you can't move back. You have no choice. You will be moving out and not moving back. People who were forced out of the communities, forced into alien communities. So I'm glad Councillor Cantwell now has seen the light and is approving of building houses for our council tenants. Because again, when the opposition were in power, we had 100% council land, which was for council housing. And that was sold off to private developers. I don't know what margins we got for that, but we lost our land, we lost our crown jewels, and now we're trying to make up. We value our residents. These properties will be for council tenants, not for private renters.
Councillor McQueen.
I'll be super brief and I'll just lead from what Mark was saying and I'll just say Water Lane.
Councillor Bick.
Yeah, thank you, Mayor. I think Councillor Ashton wasn't listening carefully enough to the question Councillor Porro just asked, because I think he would have a response, in fact, from that question. I wanted to ask a different question of the Executive Councillor, and it's simply this, and it, I think, requires a pretty factual answer. Are existing tenants able to refuse to move, and have they been told so? And what have they been told will happen if they do refuse to move?
Okay. Anybody else? No? Councillor Johnson, you have your right to apply.
So in terms of the homeless policy, I will obtain some information from officers because I don't know the exact information that has been requested by Councillor Bick and Councillor Poor. I'm being honest. I don't know. So I will seek that information. But that's all I'm going to say, Madam.
Okay. So we'll now go to the vote. Please can I see those in favour of the recommendation?
24.
Those against? No? Abstentions?
13.
Thank you. Okay, we now turn to agenda item 7C on page 57 to 78, recommendation of the Executive Councillor for Finance and Resources, Annual Treasury Management Report 2018-19. Does Councillor Robinson wish to introduce this item?
No, thanks. But I'll take any questions there are on it. We dealt with it at S&R, but if there are any questions, I'll handle them.
Okay. Thank you. Is there a spokes? Okay. Is there a debate then? No? Okay. So Councillor Robertson, no? Okay. Councillor Dazal? No? Okay. Okay, I'll go to the vote then. Please, can I see those in favour of the recommendations? Oh.
Right, that's unanimous bar 2, so that's 35. 35.
Right, okay, lovely. And there's none against? No, no abstentions. Right, okay. We now turn to... Oh, sorry, I went to the wrong page. Okay. We now turn to agenda item 4D on page 79 to 122, recommendation of the Executive Council of Finance and Resources, 2018-19 General Fund Overview Revenue and Capital Outturn, carry forwards and significant variance. Does Councillor Robinson wish to introduce this item?
Yes.
You have 5 minutes.
Come on, we've got to talk about what happened last year with the accounts, what the outturn was. I think it's important we do look at this one. It's not just a technical thing. This is, you know, as you probably know, the council has a long history of ending up each year with a net underspend of its budget. And we've been working hard on that to try and get to grips with that. Now, this is caused by some underspending on expenditure and overachieving on income, and particularly overachieving on income. Now, in the last two or three budgets we've tried to adjust figures to anticipate where we're likely to underspend. We have gaps in officer posts. When people leave, we are not able to recruit as quickly as we would like, and we have to anticipate that there will be savings as a result of that. And so we've been building into the budget some attempts to improve on that. Nevertheless, that's still a work in progress, and it still needs further finessing. For the year we've just finished, there was a revenue underspend of 1.294 million, so it's 1.3 million effectively. But of that, we want to carry forward some items because they are basically, they're generally where we've received grants before the work can actually be done. Some of the grants only received right at the end of the financial year. Obviously, you can't spend it immediately, so you carry it forward into the new year. So that there's just under £1 million worth of items carried forward on the general fund. On the other of the variances that we've found during the year, there were some, as well as all the favourable variances, there were some adverse variances, and two in particular I'll draw attention to. One of them was the Clay Farm Community Centre. Now, unfortunately, the firm which was employed to build that centre had a pretty disastrous time right the way through, and some parts of it have still not actually been opened because of their incompetence. There were losses for us in terms of all the staff we had to employ, which we'd started to employ to run the community centre, but there was no income to match that because the building wasn't open, so they had to do other jobs for at least a year, I think. And there was also the surgery, the health centre on the first floor, which suffered major contamination due to the incompetence of the builder, and has, I think, only just being opened now, very late. So those two items alone make up £750,000 worth of overspend, but they're also, sorry, that's just one item. The other item is the crematorium, where we have suffered losses mainly because of the effects of the A14 works passing by the crematorium building. We are both that and the Clay Farm. We're anticipating recovering money from in the first place the builder, and in the second place the constructors of the A14 works. The builder, I think, we're more likely to get in the near future. I'm told that recovering the losses on the crematorium will take quite a few years to pass through the process, but nevertheless we will be working on what figures might be achievable. But for the moment they are not in the accounts. We are not assuming any particular figure, but I think it will be substantial, well over £500,000 I'd imagine, by the time the thing gets finished. So those are some of the highlights of this report. They have been, each scrutiny committee has had an element of this report to look at, including the SNR itself on its own budget. But if there are any questions tonight, I'm quite happy to try and field them. Thanks.
Thank you. Mr. Spokes?
Thank you, Madam Mayor, and thank you to officers for preparing this detailed report. The key focus for this council when reviewing this report should be the underspends and, most importantly, the carry-forward requests that we are being requested to approve and are detailed in Appendices C and D. Now, these carry-forwards and underspends can arise for reasons outside the control of this council and for good reasons, for good performance, some of which that Councillor Robertson has highlighted. However, they can also indicate a failure to deliver on some projects on a timely basis and reduce spending in some key areas which we might have been able to do otherwise. Now, this is reflected in delays on several key feasibility studies that are included within that appendix, and also, as was mentioned, in understaffing in some areas that I hope as a council as a whole we can look to help officers with through discussion around the benchmarking and how we address the recruitment issues that some teams are having. There is a particular item as well that I did want to raise on page 111, which shows a £360,000 underspend on the vehicle replacement programme. Now, under questioning from Councillor Martinelli in the budget, we were shown that a replacement of vehicles this year with electric alternatives would be £300,000 more than the diesel option that was eventually settled upon. Now, I would ask whether, given the climate change emergency that we declared in February, whether we might seek to actually utilise these underspends to start to modernise our fleet as quickly as possible. And I would ask for the Executive Councillor to answer specifically on that question. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Is there a debate? Councillor Bick? Yes, sorry. Sorry, I thought Councillor Bick put his hand up first. Sorry.
I'd just like to, thank you, Madam Mayor. I'd just like to express my concern around item 1.2 on page 81, that this will be the last year that individual financial reports are being provided to scrutiny committees. As a new councillor, although I'm sure my experience applies to more experienced councillors coming onto a new committee, I think these reports have provided a very valuable way of getting a sense of the scope and scale of the operations involved. And in addition, it's even on a brief time on the Environment and Community Scrutiny Committee, those financial reports have led directly to 2 areas that are now being investigated. I'm sure everyone in this room, regardless of party, regardless of their role, believes firmly in the importance of effective scrutiny, and so I'd encourage reconsidering whether those reports are to be withdrawn. Thank you.
Councillor Bick.
Thanks, Madam Mayor. I wanted to highlight 2 of the larger items of variance, one on the revenue side and one on the capital side. And in fact, one of them is the same one, one of the ones that Councillor Robertson already referred to. On the revenue side, that's the one, the largest single variance is a loss of income of nearly £500,000 in bereavement services, as he has said on page 92. This has been mainly covered by taking money from the investment fund intended to develop the service for the future, and to a lesser extent by holding off on operational recruitment. Now, on reading this, this is a very serious situation for a much valued service, which, as we know, operates in a mixed economy of other public and other private providers, which in the past has tended to pay for itself. This obviously can't go now without serious consequences like this. So the explanation provided suggests, I think a little bit differently from how Councillor Robertson just described it, the explanation provided in the paper suggests that a mixture of factors may be at work, including increased competition from a new private crematorium in the area, and indeed, as he said, access difficulties created because of the A14 construction. So I'd like to ask, does the Executive Councillor responsible for the service, Councillor Smith, feel that these 2 factors and any others can be clearly enough separated to enable a successful compensation claim to be made to Highways England? And if so, what proportion of it does she believe can be justifiably attributed to the A14? And on the capital side, my point is that one of the larger variances is the underspend of more than £500,000, of almost £500,000, on the Environmental Improvement Programme. That's on page 112. Now, year after year, we see this same picture. As I understand it, this is not an absence of projects identified and agreed by area committees to invest in improving their communities. And it obviously isn't the money to spend on them, because we're sitting here looking at what was budgeted for it, but wasn't spent. It's a continuous inability to deliver them. What is the Executive Councillor responsible for the service concern, which I think is Councillor Thornborough, going to do about improving the capacity of the Council and to remove this everlasting bottleneck to delivery without intermittently resorting to the measure of turning off the taps for new projects, which is a really disingenuous way of solving the problem. We as members, and you on your side as we on our side, have many projects we're waiting to have delivered. The money is there to deliver them, but the capacity is consistently unavailable to deliver them in a timely fashion.
Okay, anybody else? No? Ah, Councillor Smith.
I'm going to come back on that. You'll appreciate that obviously these are quite technical questions, and I did bring all the technical material needed to community services, and no one asked me that there, and I don't have it with me today. So I can only give you some kind of looser answers now. I'm very happy to ensure that officers provide you with more detailed ones if you would like that. A14 roadwork is clearly having quite an impact. It's a huge impact on what we're doing, and you can see that people are choosing other places because they can't get there, and that's clearly a massive issue. We are still moving forward with other things that are needing to be done. We haven't paused on every piece of work. We're still moving forward with the cafe. We're still moving forward with the additional car park. That will be operational when the A14 works are completed. And the alternative access road that will eventually come into being will, I think, really enhance what we're doing. So having obviously only picked this up again very recently with the shuffle around in the summer, very aware that we have an excellent team that are planning very carefully on how we will mitigate this in the future. It's also worth pointing out that we recorded a miss on expected income based on our 2016-17 income, which was the highest on records. It did still deliver £150,000 profit, and that is worth, I think, pointing out. And I think in that circumstance, that our team can do that in that really difficult circumstance, I think is really impressive. They are pursuing the loss of income came with Highways England. We're looking at a kind of 4 to 5 year delivery point for that, but it obviously is something that is being looked at because it is really problematic, and it's not what anybody wants.
Thank you. Councillor Thornborough?
I think you asked me the same question last year, and I explained that quite a lot of the applications involved highways, and even if where the budgets were approved for particular projects involving highways, sometimes they become so complicated and take so long that they have to be abandoned. But I've also looked at the figures, and for some reason that some wards don't apply for the full amount that they are able to apply for in the past.
Okay. Rosie?
Thank you. I think my question was, are we getting electric vehicles? So the answer is yes, we have been doing already where it's possible. Obviously, electric vehicles, the technology is improving all the time. The Waste Service just organised an event on Clean Air Day. It was maybe like a month ago, 2 months ago. Time flies. And they had an electric vehicle. I drove around the waste. Oh, I didn't drive. I got driven round. There might have been more in the news if I'd driven it. It was very nice. Looked like a normal waste vehicle, but it was electric. We organised an event. Council officers came from all over the country to the event to look at and find out more about electric vehicles. We will definitely be getting some ourselves. We will start initially with maybe one, because we need the infrastructure. The plan is to have, there's a field next to the waste depot, to have solar panels on the field, and that will make electricity from the sunshine, and that will power the electric bin lorries. But obviously that's going to take time, and as I say, it's new technology. At the moment, electric bin lorries are twice the price, and they are untested. So the one we saw has been tested, used for a few days around, but we don't really know how long they'll last. So it's a work in progress. And the last thing to say is we're also doing a fleet review this year, so we will have a much clearer picture of what vehicles we need, what our vehicles do, and where we can replace better or even not have fewer vehicles.
Thank you. Councillor Ashton?
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I'd like to congratulate our executive councillors on being so honest with these figures. When we were in opposition and we questioned Councillor Bick, who was in charge at the time, and I'd suggest to our executive councillors they use the same phrase. He used to come up with slippage. So every year when I challenged him on the underspend, his technical term was slippage. And that was £8 million one year. And the following year, I think he got it down to just under 8 million. And it was slippage again. And the following year, it was slippage again. So maybe we should be using the same technical term because he understands that term, slippage.
Okay, anybody else? No? Okay then. Councillor Robinson, would you like to?
Yes, there's one item left for me to deal with, which is the question of the reporting on these outturn items. We're striving to be as efficient as possible and to cut down the amount of paperwork we produce and the amount of time that needs to be allocated for these things. So we concluded that bringing together all the individual reports on all the departments to the Strategy and Resources Committee was the best approach, and that is what we plan to do next year. SNR is open to anybody to attend, of course, and you could ask for questions at that meeting. So I don't think we want to review that decision. It will make the life of the council more efficient, and it's the progress that we need.
Thank you. Okay, we will now go to the vote. Please can I see those in favour of recommendations?
So that's 25.
Mm-hmm. Okay, those against? Those abstentions?
Okay, so that's 12 abstentions.
Okay, thank you. We now turn to agenda item 5, oral questions. This item will last a maximum of 30 minutes. The executive councillor, chair or nominee will have up to 2 minutes to reply. The questionnaire will then have 2 minutes to put a supplementary question or to seek clarification of the response to the original question. The executive councillor, chair or nominee will have a further 2 minutes to reply to the supplementary question. At the conclusion of the 30 minutes, those that have not answered may provide a written response to the member who put the question. Councillor Collis has the first question.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Can the Executive Councillor update us on the progress of the anti-poverty strategy?
Okay, thank you, Councillor Collis, and welcome to the Council. The idea of a Council anti-poverty strategy was introduced in 2014, and the current strategy is running from 2017 to next year. We've just had our annual review of the strategy, and there's a lot of really exciting work being done. The strategy underpins everything we do, so a lot of the work takes place as part of our business as usual work. For example, we have a community grants programme of over £1 million, funding almost 100 voluntary and community groups, and groups must show how they are addressing at least one of our anti-poverty targets in order to be eligible for that grant. We've made discretionary housing payments to more than 600 households and are well on the way to building those over 500 much-needed council homes. We've also established many specific anti-poverty projects. For example, and these are all just examples because I could go on for 10 minutes or an hour about all of this. For instance, we fund a financial inclusion officer, a fuel and water poverty officer, and a living wage officer. And I think we're probably the only council in the country to do that. Though I wouldn't like to swear to that, but certainly it was massively praised at the Living Wage Award ceremonies, where we had won an award for our work there. We help to provide, along with local churches, hundreds of free holiday lunches. We work with Cambridge Sustainable Food to provide cookery advice, we provide free and subsidised sports sessions, and have tried to mitigate the impact of the introduction of universal credit by funding a Citizens Advice Bureau advised at the Job Centre. It's coming up for review. At the moment, we're looking at how we can make it even better in the future. It's a fantastic strategy that I'm really proud of.
Councillor Collis, you have 2 minutes.
Thank you, yes. Having worked in frontline services with people suffering the impact of poverty across the city, I'm really encouraged to hear the progress of our strategy. Clearly, you know, there is more to do, but I think everybody in the chamber on both sides can be really proud of what's been achieved. I wonder, as an addition, can the Executive Councillor also update us on the period poverty project?
Thank you, and thank you for your words on that. I think we all agree around this table that we can't promise magic solutions, but we can promise to do everything we possibly can do to ensure that we target our support to those who need it the most, and I think we probably all share that commitment. In terms of period poverty, our community centres are now making supplies available, supplies of sanitary products available free and accessibly, and we are working on other council facilities now to try and extend that. We're also working in partnership with county partners and other partners across the city. And I'm pleased to announce that today, Arbury Court Library launched a collection point pilot. And that means that members of the public can donate sanitary products there, and women and girls can take what they need without stigma. And we hope that that will be the start of rolling this out across more of the libraries in the city, which is really exciting. We're, of course, working with the local food bank as a main distribution point, but we're also looking for others too, and looking for council points where we can. So, for example, we're looking to develop Scrap Store as a potential collection and distribution point for the autumn. So this is something I know that we all share a real commitment to in this chamber, and it's really exciting to see things moving along.
Thank you. Question 2.
Question 2 to the Executive Council for Housing, Madam Mayor.
No, you're number 3, mine. Rod. Sorry, Rod. Question number 2. Question number 2.
Councillor, planning policy and open spaces.
Yes, it is very important that we concentrate on water fountains being installed, and we have had a successful trial on Parker's Piece with the water fountains, and we are also we've worked with Anglia Water to have water banks when on at events, and they've been very successful. So we are looking at using the environmental improvement programme to look at where we can use water refill points in suitable places throughout the city, wherever we can, in the parks particularly.
Thank you very much. Madam Mayor, as the Executive Councillor knows, she promised already in April that the fountain, the public fountain on Lammas Land, would be functional by the summer. Lots of plastic waste is produced every day on Lammas Land. It's not suitable for our carbon neutrality strategy. And nonetheless, we still don't have a functioning water fountain. We have 3 non-functioning water fountains on Lammas Land, a problem that she identified a long time ago. I really don't understand why you're declaring a climate emergency, a biodiversity crisis, and then on this simple issue of installing the water fountain. And when we asked at Western Central Area Committee, we were told, oh, this is already approved and will be installed. Now here we are in July, and nothing has happened. How can this be?
That particular environmental improvement project was no, it wasn't slippage. It has been on the books for a while because it was very complicated, and I've been told that that particular project has been abandoned, and that's what was told at the committee. But that was a water fountain. We're looking at refill points where we can actually fit them to the sides of buildings, and we're going to be looking at community centres and public toilets and other buildings wherever we can. And we are looking to identify suitable places in every single ward and every single area, and they are going to be brought to the area committees, and the ward councillors and the residents will be able to select where they have the water refill points.
Thank you. Question 3. Sorry.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Now it's my turn. Councillor, my question goes to the Executive Councillor for Housing.
City Council is doing an enormous amount to deal with rough sleeping as follows. We make grants of over £700,000 to agencies that provide accommodation and welfare services. We set aside 40 social tenancies a year, helping former rough sleepers to move out of hostels and creating space for newcomers. We fund a street outreach team with a remit to find and assist everyone sleeping rough in the city. We make generous provision for the Access Scheme to assist people into private sector tenancies. We provide funding through our Housing Benefit Plus scheme to help people leaving hostels to afford the cost of renting in Cambridge. This scheme also provides employment support so that when the top-up payment stops, the customer can pay the rent in full. We have a social lettings agency, Town Hall Lettings, which helps source and manage private sector accommodation for people who would otherwise be homeless. Our single homelessness service has now assisted over 500 people to find a place of their own, getting them quickly off the streets before they might develop the habits which make it more difficult for them to be assisted. There are over 500 supported beds in Cambridge City, of which at least 300 are for people who are homeless. We have produced a pocket-sized, fold-out booklet which provides information about the range of services available in the city for people on the streets. It is aimed at rough sleepers themselves or anyone concerned about rough sleepers. From November to March each year, the Council and its partner agencies provide extra beds for rough sleepers when the weather turns bad. Last winter, up to 46 beds were available over a 5-month period. We have successfully bid to central government for £270,000 worth of discretionary funding. Amongst other things, it can be used to support an extension to street outreach service that could be run in the evenings and at weekends. And Street Aid now has 6 contactless giving points around the city following a partnership with the Co-op. Further terminals are planned.
Madam Mayor.
Of course, we want to eliminate homelessness. Street homelessness is a scourge in our city and across the United Kingdom. There is a homelessness emergency. In addition to what has been said about climate emergency, I think there's a homelessness emergency. But there has been one since 2010. There has been a homelessness emergency since 2010. Homelessness was decreasing to the 13 years previous to 2010. After 2010, it rose significantly. It rose significantly after then. But unfortunately, the Lib Dem Tory coalition and their austerity agenda was behind the sudden increase, and we are still suffering the effects today. We need a Labour government that will actually deal with the structural issues to provide the support for us as in local government to eliminate homelessness once and for all.
Number 4.
Question 4, Madam Mayor.
As Councillor Bick knows, the Housing First model has been used in here and other cities to support those rough sleepers of complex needs who have had a history of repeat homelessness and failure to progress through the hostel and existing supported rehousing pathways. So whilst hostels may not be the way forward for some rough sleepers, we are not against hostels per se, and Housing First, in our view, isn't necessarily a like-for-like replacement of the hostel system.
Thanks, Madam Mayor. The very visible number of rough sleepers that's daily on our streets sadly suggests that there is absolutely no shortage of individuals needing support of one sort or another. And I agree with the Executive Councillor that different individuals require different types of support. Why then is he acquiescing in the proposed closure of Willow Walk Hostel, the only homeless hostel in the city which addresses the needs of former rough sleepers with the highest level of support needs, providing the kind of structure that many former rough sleepers need who will never be immediate candidates for Housing First? Is he aware that the development of Housing First, which he's presiding over, which the city does badly need in order to have a richer and more effective mix of options, is in his version actually going to be funded by the closure of an existing option that practitioners in the field see as continuing to be vital, or the spillover back to the streets will actually increase rather than reduce? Isn't there a danger that the good idea of Housing First will never achieve the impact it might because it's being used, unfortunately, as a cover for reducing overall resources dedicated to solving the still growing problem of rough sleeping?
Thank you, Thank you. For you, Madam Mayor, yes, it's true that the county have decided to withdraw funding from Willow Walk from 2021. But I can't speculate on what will happen to the facility after that date. As Councillor Bick knows, because it's in his ward, Riverside have committed to the continued use of that site for homelessness provision, whatever happens. But in terms of Housing First, we think that for many people, long-term hostel accommodation, as I said, is not a good solution. And for some with high needs, it's not an option at all. And we would expect that the Housing First model is successful over time. If it is successful over time, the city's needs for hostel accommodation will decline. However, we are just only introducing Housing First tenancies at a time when housing pressures are very high indeed, and reductions in other services, for example, at hostels like Willow Walk, can increase pressures on people who are at risk of homelessness. So, in fact, I actually would prefer that Willow Walk continue to have the funding from the County Council. It's a shame that the Tory authority there is determined to reduce that funding, because, as I mentioned in my first answer, Housing First and hostels do actually have a role to play in terms of the overall mix of facilities and services for those who are homeless.
Councillor 5.
Councillor 5.
Sorry.
Question number Price.
I've only got figures up to April 2019. We are waiting for more recent figures from the Cambridgeshire Community Foundation, but a grand total of £57,257.44 has been raised, and 179 grants have been given to people on the streets to help turn their lives around.
Councillor Price.
Yes, thank you, Madam Mayor, and thank you, Councillor Johnson, for your response. I think we can all be very, very pleased with the good work that is being done and the profile that has been raised for Cambridge Street Aid to have raised that £57,000 in what is usually in small donations is a massive achievement. Could you tell us what further plans, and I know you mentioned this briefly earlier, what further plans there are to increase the level of fundraising for that particular charity? Thank you.
Well, as Councillor Price knows, we recruited several volunteers. We have a part-time volunteer, sorry, we have a part-time paid member of staff whose job is to try and motivate volunteers, to gather volunteers, to promote street aid within the community. There's been a number of various charity events that have taken place across the city over recent months to try and get street aid out there, because if we can get the message out there that there is actually a way in which people can provide proper support for those on the streets, then that's good for us. It's good for the homeless, and it's good for the community, because they know that there is their money is being put to good use. So yes, we will continue to keep things under review, but at the minute I'm very pleased with how it's performing.
Number 6.
Thank you, Mayor. Yeah, question number 6.
So the question is, does the council have data regarding the level of recycling at events? So the events team, which actually comes under Councillor Katie Thornborough in her portfolio, it doesn't hold data on levels of recycling, because the events team organises the events, but the waste is a commercial waste contract. Unlike many councils, we do have our own commercial waste service who are available for events, but unfortunately not all event organisations use our service. For example, some are events which they hold all over the country, they travel around, and they've already got someone that they contract in. The commercial waste service do have some data, for example, when it's our service that is collecting the waste. So, for example, the half marathon has a recycling rate of 82%, and it's usually very good quality with low contamination, because one side sounds good, the other side is. Most of it is plastic bottles for the event. So that's an improvement, but encouraging them to have reusable bottles is something that we will work on. We're very happy that this year we had the contract for the beer festival, which had a 70% recycling rate, but as this is the first year, we don't have anything to compare it to, other than anecdotally, the beer festival said it was a great service and recycling was up.
Oh, sorry, I'm very sorry.
No need to apologise, Madam Mayor. Thank you. And thank you, Councillor, for a clear and honest answer. So, to pick up an issue, and I've been picking at some of the events myself recently, I noted within the current policy for the use of parks and open spaces, we encourage recycling, we encourage the principles. But actually, I wondered if, in order to improve outcomes, the Exec Councillor would support strengthening those existing policies, helping to develop with officers clear environmental standards for all of the events that we do hold, which then seek to minimise the use of single-use plastics and maximise recycling. Furthermore, if we were to do that, it would be very useful if we could then increase the level of support that this council offers to event organisers. I think the Scottish Borders Council, for example, provide a number of additional pieces of information and encouragement. And finally, actually, we could even introduce inspections to events to judge how those standards are applied and provide advice and support to make further improvements in current years. Thank you.
It's a bit difficult because now this isn't my portfolio. I can say it from my perspective. I don't know what we do about that when the question is to the wrong executive councillor. Clear and honest answers. Maybe I'm not always clear, but I feel I'm always honest. Maybe I'm lying to myself, who knows. Inspections to events. Well, we do inspect events, for example, for environmental health, with food, inspections to events re-waste. We are talking about doing an events sort of guide, which would help anyone organising an event, whether it was on our land or not, in terms of waste. As I said, it's not really my portfolio, but we have been, our portfolios have been talking to each other, and we are working on a clearer waste strategy to help reduce the amount of waste on events.
Councillor Thornborough, did you want to say anything? It means it's your portfolio.
We are looking at the terms and references and things like we want to stop the use, don't want balloons going off and things like that because it's, terrible, the plastic, and it's an environmental disaster really. So we're looking at reviewing the terms to make things more sustainable. So those suggestions will be considered. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Number 7.
Yeah, so question 7, please.
Thank you, Councillor, and also welcome to the Chamber. I really do wish this was a question I didn't have to answer, because these things shouldn't be happening at all. The cuts made on Tuesday seem to be falling disproportionately on the elderly and the vulnerable. Funding to Dial-A-Ride is cut. Funding to the Stroke Association, which gives much needed care to people in their homes after a stroke, was cut. Funding for the Carers Trust to be renegotiated to include support only for the highest need people, cut. Those of us who have been following it closely know it could have been even worse on Tuesday, but that really isn't saying very much. Yesterday, £500,000 of cuts were made. The shocking thing is the CCG still aims to make a further £32.5 million of savings this year. We are absolutely not out of the woods. The main point is that none of these cuts should have to have been made at all. Healthcare, like education, like social care, like policing, like so much of local government, is facing unsustainable cuts. The austerity policies of the coalition and Tory governments are taking public services to breaking point and beyond. And it is the most vulnerable who are and will continue to suffer. There is an urgent need for funding across the country and an urgent need for parity as well. Just as we've seen with education funding, our region is near the bottom of the list when it comes to getting its fair share. The Cambridgeshire CCG, I believe, is the 3rd lowest funded in the country. There are others getting over £350 per head of population more than Cambridgeshire is. The government needs to sit up and take action. It needs to stop clinging to an ideological austerity policy. It needs to start funding our services properly.
Thank you, Councillor Smith, for that response. And I would agree that it's clear that these cuts are a direct result of the disastrous austerity policies that were introduced by government 9 years ago and that our current government continues to cling to. And as you say, there are those in our communities that rely on these services, and there are vulnerable people in our communities that rely on these services, and they will be negatively impacted. I understand, as you said, that there are further cuts in the pipeline and that more spending limits will remain to be made. And I'm concerned to know that this is just the tip of the iceberg. So I was wondering whether Councillor Smith agrees with me that we should keep a close eye on those services that are up for renegotiation, including the Joint Emergency Team, that provide support for people to stay at home rather than be admitted into hospital. Because we don't want these crucial services to become shadows of their former selves as these austerity cuts continue.
Thank you. Absolutely agree. I mean, I think there were suggestions initially that the Joint Emergency Team was going to be cut this Tuesday, and obviously I think we're all relieved it hasn't been cut at the moment, and the CCG are taking more time to renegotiate, to consider its future. This team is absolutely vital in supporting vulnerable people. Apparently around about 10,000 patient contacts are made each year. It is crucial in ensuring that people who need emergency support but do not need hospitalisation are treated in their homes in a really swift and effective way. And I'm sure that many of us in this chamber have maybe had cause to be glad of that support for friends or relatives or constituents. We're really going to have to keep a close eye on this. What worries me is that it's unpopular now, it's going to get kicked in the long grass and then quietly cut again when no one is looking. And I think we really need to monitor this closely. As I said, they are aiming to make £33 million worth of savings this year. They made £500,000 worth of cuts yesterday. There's a heck of a lot of savings they are still looking to make, and we need to monitor this closely. And we need to keep the pressure up on government, because there is a chronic and horrific lack of funding, and it cannot be allowed to continue.
Number 8.
Question number 8.
Yes, the police station. I have to talk about my favourite person now, don't I? Jason Oberwhite. Right, well, what can I update you? I had a very interesting meeting with the Police and Crime panel last month, end of the month. It was tense, to say the least. Jason, at the time, said he was never intended to meet any Cambridge City Councillor of any kind. Thankfully, he's changed his mind, and myself and Councillor Herbert have managed to persuade him that we do need meeting, and we will be talking to him next week, actually. How long we get, I don't know. But in the meantime, the city officers have been talking to, they're working with the local police officers and the Office of Police and Crime Commissioner, not necessarily himself, to consider what numbers of neighbourhood policing that we require in the city, the pressures and the public requirements for access, and the options for any co-locations. We're putting pressure on retaining a city centre police station. We will have a city centre police station, but I'm going to promise that. He won't get away with it. But in the meantime, I have to make more meetings with Jason. Now, he does keep saying that this is not his decision to move the police station. He says it's the Chief Constable, Nick Dean. However, it's him that's facing it up, really, isn't it? He announced his plan. So in the meantime, yes, we'll wait and see, and I'll let you know next week how it goes.
You don't want to? No? Okay. Right, we've run out of time, so I know, sorry. So if members can write back to the councillors that the questions haven't been answered, that would be great. Thank you very much. Right, we move to agenda item 6. The mover and seconder have up to 10 minutes between them where there are amendments. The proposer and seconder of the amendments also have 10 minutes between them. And all other contributions are up to 3 minutes per council. When debate has concluded, I will call for a vote on the amendment, and if carried, there is a second vote on the motion as amended, but with no further debate.
Madam Mayor, just a polite inquiry. We're not going to have a little break about now, are we, perhaps, do you think? Sorry, yeah. I just thought we might have a break.
Yes, I thought that we'd do this motion and then have a break, if that's okay with Chambers, yeah? Okay, lovely. So, Councillor Martinelli?
Thank you, Madam Mayor. So, Council, thank you for letting me propose this motion. I think it is a topic about which many members feel passionate. So, pesticides have been used by humans in one form or another for thousands of years to control our natural environment. The aims of exerting this control have often had noble motivations, but I think we are now increasingly seeing the nocive effects of this practice in our city. Pesticides constitute a blunt tool to kill off natural organisms. There is certainly no denying that they are effective. However, this same efficacy necessarily leads to the destruction of habitats for insects, small animals and birds, as well as poisoning of their food supply. It decreases the number and variety of plants that thrive in Cambridge. I wish to avoid descending into alarmism about the potential health impacts of pesticides, as the overall risk to residents remains small, but the World Health Organization's International Agency for Research on Cancer has very clearly stated that glyphosate, the major active ingredient in our herbicides, is probably carcinogenic. I absolutely do congratulate the ruling group on what they have done to reduce pesticide use within Cambridge's open spaces, as detailed in their 559 amendment. I do, however, feel that this is only the first necessary stage as part of an overall strategy for more deep-seated change. In addition to our open spaces, we have to acknowledge the large quantity of pesticides used by city council teams to manage our pathways and verges. The abundance of hard areas in an urban environment, of course, means that there is less soil available in which these chemicals can be broken down to harmless constituents. Beyond this, we need to consider how we can work with the universities and other major land managers in Cambridge to reduce their pesticide use. Our proposal, therefore, is that we should seek to bind ourselves and our partner organisations into a concrete strategy with regular stakeholder forum to help push through these further necessary changes. We will need to have a clear dialogue with our residents about these alterations and explain that an increase in weediness is not necessarily a sign of neglect. We would set a target of 3 years to complete this process based on the experience other authorities have had. As has well been established in this chamber, most recently with our plan for an ambitious carbon neutrality target, our group does feel that setting specific achievable policy targets for the Council is a vital part of ensuring accountability. As such, I do think it would, once again, be a great shame to lose that aspect of the motion in amendment. I do not see this motion as a particularly radical bit of policy. Many towns and cities in Europe have been pesticide-free since the last century, and other UK cities such as Brighton and Bristol have committed to doing so, the latter having also adopted a 3-year phase-out plan. I would be grateful for your support of this motion, members.
Councillor Martinella, who's your seconder? Sorry. Okay, would you like to speak now, Councillor McGurty? You reserve your right. You have 7.5 minutes, okay. I call on Councillor Thornborough to move the amendment which has been updated since midday yesterday. Under Council Procedure Rules 23.3, the Council may, by a sample majority, permit amendments to be moved where no or inadequate notice has been given. Councillor Thornborough, will you explain the revised amendment? And does the Council agree to suspend the Council Procedure Rule 23.2 amendments by midday and preceding day to permit the amendment to be put to the Council? Everyone happy? Okay. Shall we vote? I think those in favour, please can I have a show of hands?
So that's 25.
Okay, those against?
So that's 12.
And any abstentions? 1. Okay. Okay, Councillor Thornborough, would you like to?
Can I just explain the amendment
Yes, of
before I do
course.
my... So the...
Sorry?
My hand's up before, but I didn't think I was noticed, but it would have been very helpful to hear Councillor Thorn's explanation for why the amendment was brought...
That's what she's going
no,
to
No,
do.
my point, Madam Mayor, is it would have been very helpful to hear that explanation before we voted, as the circumstances under which she brings the amendment late might have influenced our vote.
Okay. Councillor Thornborough.
So my first amendment referred to pesticides, and it's been made clear at a late date that actually in the parks and open spaces, the majority of the use is herbicides, and we wanted to distinguish between herbicides and pesticides because pesticides are used for other purposes within the council's work, and we didn't want this motion to limit that. But also there was also a point that in exceptional circumstances I wanted to allow the council to use pesticides when requested in very exceptional circumstances, which I would explain as I speak. Those are the reasons.
Okay, Councillor Somber, you can now do your amendment.
Yes, thanks. Madam Mayor, I'd like to thank Councillor Martinelli for bringing this motion to this council meeting, as it allows me to outline the ways in which we're already moving to make Cambridge a herbicide-free city. It also gives me a chance to reiterate our commitment to work with other authorities and the wider community to ensure that other users of herbicides also work towards eliminating their use. You will now be aware, having seen our amended motion, that the Council is no longer using herbicides for general management in our parks and open spaces. I'd like to tell you a little about how this came about and why I believe we should commend the Streets and Open Spaces team for their work on this important matter. Earlier this year, as I was working on the biodiversity emergency motion, which we passed at our last meeting, I learned much more about the huge and ongoing damage being done to the environment and the need to consider these issues in a different way, one that gave due weight to the critical situation now we find ourselves in over species loss. We had begun trials to see if we could reduce our herbicide use, and I discussed these with the SOS team. Those trials started from an assumption that we would use herbicides on the council's open spaces and would try and reduce the levels, but we agreed that it would be better to reverse this thinking and start from the premise of using no herbicides, except where there was good justification for their use in specific areas for specific purposes. We decided to trial this new approach from April. This was a big change. It requires a shift in mindset regarding the care and management of our open spaces. So we did not simply issue an order to stop these chemicals. Our ecologists talked to the operatives about the reasons for these changes and asked their views on how to implement the policy on the ground, or rather on the grass. The teams are out in the spaces every day. They see the problems and the successes, and they speak to the residents and visitors, and their understanding and support are vital if we are to deliver forward-thinking policies like this. So we talked to every team member about the policy, the reason for it, and the challenges it created. For example, without herbicides, there will be more nature, and our open spaces, and some may see as being a bit more untidy. Fellow councillors will know that we do occasionally get messages when mowing or vegetation clearance is considered late. The team have also talked to residents groups and friends groups about the new approach and how green areas will be different, and we have started an awareness programme which we will plan to develop into a major campaign. So the SOS team were working on this, and after a few months they came back to me to say that they had implemented zero herbicide for use for general management from the 1st of July. It will now only be used to treat pests where they pose a biosecurity threat. I was taken aback by this amazing news. The SOS team had understood the importance of removing herbicides from their toolkit, took on the challenge and delivered. We still have much to do with this new approach, and it will be reviewed as we see what changes it creates in our open spaces. We will work with and listen to our residents and friends groups, but this is now our current practice, in line with the commitment in our biodiversity emergency motion to act during the first year to walk towards future measurable biodiversity net gain for Cambridge. We want to do more, for example, to stop using herbicides on footways and verges, which we maintain on behalf of the County Council, and we are in advanced discussions about this. We also want private individuals, local businesses, the universities and colleges, and everyone else to see how they could stop using herbicides. So we will raise awareness on this issue and of the steps that can be taken. And we don't want to just stop using herbicides. We will continue to help people to recognise, appreciate, and help to improve nature in our city. There are many aspects to this. One that is dear to me is the Hedgehog Awareness Campaign, which started in May and continues through the year, with a monthly campaign to spend time in schools, with allotment holders, even with fencing companies. Next year, we will have a campaign focusing on pollinators like bees. There will be more, and I look forward to discussing future plans and taking the views of all interested parties into account. This change in approach matters, so I'd like to extend an invitation to all ward councillors to take our messages, to take our message to the residents. I would be very happy to meet with you, to walk our open spaces, to tell you more and hear your concerns and meet residents. I therefore commend the motion as amended. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Hadley, did you want to reserve your right or do you want to speak now? Okay. You've got 4 minutes and 55.
Thank you. I want to say thanks to all who've worked quickly in the Council to facilitate this change in approach to herbicide and pesticide use, and to Katie for responding so quickly in light of the biodiversity crisis we all face. When we passed our biodiversity emergency motion in May, we were pledged to provide leadership and to work with the community, businesses and residents to reverse the decline in biodiversity in Cambridge. With this quick response from the Council and speaking in my capacity as the new lead councillor for biodiversity, my hope is that the wider public and organisations will take notice and stop using pesticides and herbicides too. I look to all residents and fellow councillors across the bench, and over the next year we'll look for further ideas and projects where we can work together to improve biodiversity more generally. Thank you. I support this amended motion.
Thank you very much. Councillor McGoty, did you want to speak now? Councillor Hipkin? I apologise. I apologise. Would you like to speak now, Councillor Hipkin?
I'm torn as to which of these motions I should support. I think logically I should support the amended motion because clearly in your original motion there are factual errors which have been satisfactorily corrected. My first thought is, why the hell don't you and you get together before we have council meetings when you know that the consensus is that yes, pesticides are a damn nuisance and we should be getting rid of them? That is the consensual view. Why not get together and come to us with a motion that we can all support? This party business of, you know, we put down a motion, we amend it to show that we're superior in our ethical thinking and so on, is so depressing. And may I say one other thing, particularly for the benefit of new members? If there is one way in which you will turn people off, it is by reading speeches. I wish that people would give that up, this practice. A few notes will suffice. But the minute people start reading, I, for one, just switch off. Because it is a monotonous, boring background noise. So let's have a little bit of passion and spontaneity, particularly from executive councillors.
Madam Mayor, can I just comment on that observation from Councillor Hipkin? I think it's inappropriate. I think members should be able to express themselves in whatever form they like in this chamber, from notes or written speeches. And can I just say, some of us have been around for a long time, and I remember when I was a new councillor, and I spent a lot of time writing very scripted speeches when I was very junior as a councillor. So I don't necessarily think that that's an appropriate comment that Councillor Hipkin made.
Yeah. Okay, thank you. I've got Councillor Gearing.
Thank you very much, Madam Mayor. I'm very disappointed because the biodiversity champion and the executive councillor who promoted the biodiversity emergency motion so forcefully are now denuding the Lib Dem motion on a pesticide-free city. After your amendment, you should change the title as well because it's anything but. You said that if there is a biohealth hazard, we can still use pesticides. Do you know what pesticides do? Do you know how damaging they are in any situation? I don't foresee any possibility in our streets and open spaces, especially where children play, that we would use pesticides even in exceptional circumstances. That's just not on. Also, You said, oh, we need long-term negotiations with our county council friends. I think if our staff are no longer allowed to use herbicides for city business, we just give a notice to the county council and tell them that that is the new modus operandi. I don't understand why we are hesitating on this. We're destroying bee habitats, we're destroying insects. You quoted the figure.
Chair, point of order, Chair. Can I say that this is not personal?
No, it's not personal.
You're speaking to the chair. Stop facing and talking about the yous. These are councillors. Please address your remarks to the chair.
Madam Mayor, let me redirect, Madam Mayor. I find it really disappointing that the executive councillor that so well championed the biodiversity crisis motion and declared how many insects are about to be extinct now says, well, if there is a biosafety issue, we still need to use these toxic chemicals. I think the whole council should rethink this approach and not denude this important motion. Thank you very much.
Sorry, Madam Mayor. Feels like Groundhog Day, like 2014, and I made my maiden speech. It was bumbling. There were no written things to read off, so I had to just say it as it came. It was awful. It even brought a smile to Tim Bick's face. It was about the Pest Control Service, which you were cutting. And the funny thing is one of the things that a pesticide is a rodenticide, which would kill rats and mice, which of course we still need, don't we? Because otherwise, our Turin in King's Hedges will get very
Councillor
fat.
Smart, can you put your direction to me? That's okay. Councillor Payne.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I do just think I want to highlight again, I think if this is the usual process, I haven't experienced a late amendment before, but it is really very difficult on this side of the chamber to know whether to judge to accept or reject it, not knowing what the circumstances behind it were, because there are, I'm sure, very, very good reasons to bring a late amendment. I don't think not amending a motion in time is a good one, but it would be helpful on this side of the chamber to understand what those reasons are so we can vote fairly on that process. So I would make that as a point in terms of process for the future. Thank you. To talk about the motion and the amendment, I'm probably someone who must confess to not knowing a great deal about pesticides and herbicides, etc., until a little plot started to pop up called Eddington. And an evening of insomnia took me to the North West Cambridge Environmental Statement from March 2012, Volume 1, which actually is more interesting than it sounds. And what this really opened my eyes to, actually, and why I find the clear shift away from pesticides towards herbicides in this amendment quite disappointing, is that it really testifies to the material benefit to the environment of removing high-density agricultural use of pesticides. At Eddington, as many of you are probably aware, the aim of the development and the planning regulations were to put high environmental standards at the forefront of that development, and it is noted in their environmental report that actually withdrawing the hefty pesticide use was a huge benefit to the environment there and to the biodiversity. But also the report testifies to the risk of contamination. So around Eddington, they've sought to build wildflower meadows, they have the pond, which is a real haven, and actually the risk of contamination from the soil into the water, the leaching process, was a real issue in establishing that to ensure that it was safe to establish biodiversity. So I do find it very strange to see that this amendment is making a very deliberate shift away from pesticides, particularly because within that we also include insecticides. As has been alluded to, we have a biodiversity emergency, and actually insects are the plank of biodiversity. They're a way of hugely promoting growth and biodiversity within our environment. So not addressing that issue here, I think, is a real omission. I'm also interested to see which parts here are omitted or amended due to what is perceived to be factual errors. For example, the point about exposure to pesticides being associated with human disease, harm to wildlife and contamination of our natural resources. I'd be interested to know what the Executive Council feels to be incorrect about that statement, as I don't believe it is. So, once again, Madam Mayor, we have an amendment which takes away the real heart of the issue, it takes away the real crisis we're facing, and also removes any stipulation for targets and for accountability. We've declared several emergencies in this chamber, and for both of those, we've banded words of when the target should be. It would be nice to see the ruling group allow themselves to be held accountable for the changes they wish to make. Thank you.
Councillor Green.
Yes, just to, is it easier if I stand up? Yeah. Just to speak about the pesticide issue. So I probably ought to add something about, why we might need to use pesticides in exceptional circumstances. And this is just based on my own practical experience working in local government and managing open spaces. In my time, we used to use herbicides and pesticides quite a lot. And I am actually trained in the use of pesticides because in order to employ contractors, we used to have the certificates ourselves. When I took the training, the people who trained me said, no worries about glyphosate, you can have a bath in it and it won't harm you. We know now that that's not true, but it kind of demonstrates the way that views about herbicides are changing. In the old days, there were chemicals like DDT, which they used to apply in huge quantities, huge volumes. And gradually those pesticides became outlawed. And we're now in that situation with glyphosate. We know that it's becoming, we know the dangers about it. And some of the issues to do with crops, with the genetically modified crops, they say that these are being modified so that people can use glyphosate on a massive scale, and that's the main reason. We're learning more and more, and it would be really great if Cambridge City Council can do its bit to try and address and raise awareness about the harmful effects of glyphosate and other herbicides. But there will be occasions when we need to use it, I suspect, to assist the biodiversity of other areas, like, for example, on a wildflower meadow, or perhaps on a sports pitch. I used to use it around the base of trees to stop weed competition so that trees and young saplings could grow healthily. So I think we do need to embody this aspect. We do need to make sure that there are exceptional circumstances that allow us to use pesticides. We've undertaken this change. It's a bit of a risk because the council is going to be prone to complaints about weeds and so on. There is going to be obviously a cost issue for the council, but I think on the whole we need to embrace this change and support it and take it forward from here.
Councillor Moore.
Thank you. So just to reply to Councillor Cheney's point about exposure to pesticides is associated with human disease, why has that been removed? Well, because exposure to pests is also associated with human disease, and as Councillor Smart has already mentioned, the council does run a free pest control service to all residents. So things like rats, things like cockroaches, the way that we deal with them is with the use of pesticides, and that is to for the benefit of human health. So I'm sure the members opposite, although I know they did want to cut that service previously, I'm sure they would, if they had rats or cockroaches where they lived or with their family, they would also support the use of pesticides to keep those family members safe.
Thank you. Councillor Somerville.
I just want to express my concern, having spoken at the last meeting about a group that was declaring a climate emergency and then deciding to set targets based on what they thought they might be able to achieve, not what we need to do, and then declaring a biodiversity crisis and submitting a late amendment removing all mention of insecticides, which is what is at the heart of the biodiversity crisis. Pollinating index are collapsing, and if they go, we go. Does this group know what the word crisis or emergency means?
Councillor Herbert.
Well, I don't know which city Councillor Somerville actually inhabits sometimes. If we actually look at what has been done, and this is where the motion fell into a problem, the motion talked about pesticides. Our issue as a city does include insecticides, but the main issue that we have is with the use of a herbicide. And that is the one that causes the greatest impact on biodiversity in our parks and also in the way that the County Council specifies a contract on verges. So, Councillor Somerville, is a ward councillor with Councillor Thornborough. I think he should be more generous to his fellow ward councillor, because in 3 months, she's implemented a policy on our public open spaces to end the use of glyphosates. So there's an achievement, Councillor Somerville. Isn't that good? The issue with the county council is we will aim to convince and change their position, and then we have the option, Councillor Somerville, to say, no, thank you, we're not going to implement.
Madam Mayor, could the leader possibly direct his comments to the chair? Thank you so much.
I'm just talking to the mayor at the moment, Councillor McGurty. I was at that moment when he just raised it. And then, Mayor, as I just said when Councillor McGurty interrupted me, we have the option of saying to the County Council, we do not wish to implement glyphosates on vergers, and therefore it's up to them. But it's our position that we should end glyphosate use on vergers. Thank you.
Okay, I've got nobody else who wants to speak. So, Councillor McGurty, you've got 7 minutes and 50 seconds.
Oh, sorry, Madam Mayor, I've only scripted a couple of minutes. Don't worry, I'll read from the paper. I'm sure, like me, many members present will have come into council motivated not only by the big issues facing our city, but also by the issues that might more readily be referred to as common irritants, like littering or bad parking, or the group opposite, perhaps. The kind of issues we see... I didn't script that bit, did you like it? The kind of issues we see every day, but which have a cumulative impact on our enjoyment of city life. And that's the reason that members may have noticed in committee my particular disdain for the increasing amount of dead earth around trees and signposts and fences throughout the city. And if you will permit me to go off script for a moment, Madam Mayor, or indeed if the Councillor for Castle will, I'd like to point out that there's a really shocking picture in the Cambridge News today showing exactly how bad this problem gets, with enormous amounts of dead earth around every fence post. And this is in a residential street in my ward in Queen Edith's. So I think this is a really serious issue, that people come out of their front doors and they see this every morning. And yes, it's an otherwise beautiful green and open space. And I thank you for its otherwise excellent maintenance. Sorry, I spoke directly to her. How rude of me. I apologise. I thank the Open Spaces team for their otherwise excellent maintenance. But when I look at this picture, it really does make me ashamed of this city, because you see it everywhere. And we have to stop making our own city look like this. And that's why, because it's not actually that complicated, you see, manually trimming around those fence posts, instead of walking past them with a barrel of chemicals strapped to your back. It takes about the same amount of effort. It takes about the same amount of time. And it's not, if that's not appropriate in some areas, then if it ends up looking a little bit wilder, Madam Mayor, well, people have actually been telling us loud and clear that they're okay with that. It's certainly better than the previous bare earth scorch policy, isn't it? And having passed the motion declaring a biodiversity emergency at our previous meeting, this is the perfect time for us to impart some vigour into those efforts, which is why I do welcome the motion and aspects of the amendment, but it's why I also regret the leading group's refusal to adopt a wider strategy for a pesticide-free city, which includes any sort of clear objective and targets. When will this administration come out of its unambitious slumber and start to provide some actual political leadership in Cambridge? Our complex local government demands cross-party and cross-authority working, but it also needs leadership, Madam Mayor. And Cambridge isn't, so that Cambridge isn't forgotten in that process. And the lack of it has just been added to my list of common irritants. Thank you, Madam Mayor.
Okay, Councillor Thornborough, you have 3 minutes of a right to reply.
Thank you. I have great respect for our Streets and Open Spaces team. I think they're doing a fantastic job, and I really appreciate the discussions I have with them and their advice about how they manage the spaces. And I don't want anything used on the soils and in our open spaces at all. But in exceptional circumstances, I have been advised it may be necessary and by not putting in the clause about exceptional use, we will be stopping them from doing things which will is unacceptable. And I did question this, and it will be exceptional. If we are to use any pesticides, it will be, we will notify people in advance about what is to come. It is not going to be on an ad hoc, every now and then. It will be exceptional, and people will be warned and notified in advance. So I'm pleased to listen to the officers dealing with this and to insert this, because I think it's the right thing to do going forwards. And also the verges. We can't just stop overnight the service that we provide. I don't know if you know about this incident in Newnham, where a car driver was pulling out onto the main road, and some time ago, but the verge had grown up, and that actually, I believe, contributed to the accident which caused his death. No, I've been told it was the verge as well. And we are not going to, so we are working with the highways, and we intend to eliminate the use of herbicides on the verges as well. The exposure to the pesticides clause, the reason I took that out was because it's not fully, it's too broad, and I generally agree with the comment, but I don't believe it's been proven in all cases that all pesticides have that danger, and I just felt it was open to challenge and therefore should be removed.
Thank you. Councillor Martinelli, you have 3 minutes.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. So I think I would echo the Executive Council's thanks to the Streets and Open Spaces team. I don't think this debate has been anything but respectful to the good work that they do. What I would suggest is that the complexity of the argument on both sides and the number of good issues raised, for example, by my colleagues opposite about rodenticides and the necessary use of them, perhaps in some circumstances by the Council, illustrates the complexity of some of the arguments at play and perhaps identifies the need for a strategy as requested in our motion to further implement and work through these issues. I think the key point from our point of view regarding both the motion and its amendment is we do not see it as reasonable to remove any reference to insecticides, which are a key part of the biodiversity crisis, which has been done, and we do not see it as reasonable to remove any targets for the purposes of accountability. And so for that reason, we will be opposing the amendment to this motion.
Okay, thank you very much. I will now go to the vote. Please can I see those in favour of the amendment?
That's 26.
Okay. And those against?
That's 12.
Okay. I will now go to the vote on the motion as amended. Please can I see those in favour?
So that's
Full house.
unanimous.
Okay. Lovely. Thank you very much. Okay, I'm going to go for, we'll have a break now, and if you could be back here at 20 to 9, please. Thank you. Lovely, thank you everybody. We now go to turn to agenda item 6B, entitled Universal Basic Income Pilot, to be considered by the Council, which can be found on page 3 of your agenda. I call on Councillor McQueen to move the motion and Councillor Tatala will second. You have 10 minutes between you. Councillor McQueen.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Madam Mayor, I'm aware that universal basic income is confusing to some people, so I thought I would explain the very simple idea in which it lies behind. It is that every citizen should receive a regular income from the state regardless of their circumstances. The idea itself is not a new one. It has roots in the 16th century when Thomas More argued for a universal payment for those living in poverty. A UBI differs from contributory or means-tested models of social security because people receive the same amount regardless of whether they are in or out of work or how much they earn. We have seen the impact on wages with the rise of the gig economy. Greater job insecurity with increases in self-employment, zero-hour contracts and agency work. In addition to this, the number of people who want to work more hours than they do, as well as the impact of technology and automation on employment. We all know that the average real wages have stagnated following the world financial crisis and that we have both a skills shortage in areas of growth as well as excess capacity in less relevant skills. We are also experiencing rising inequality, the hollowing of the labour market and the rise of one-wage workplaces alongside a likely fall in the demand for labour supply due to technology changes. Universal basic income would help address some of these risks. Universal basic income will support carers in the home who cannot work due to the responsibility they have. It will also give them the opportunity to become less isolated by providing means for respite, whilst giving them the security to look after their loved ones. UBI is often regarded as a radical departure from existing welfare systems, and it may well be necessary to meet the challenges of the future work. There are many versions of UBI that have been set up in Finland, California, Kenya, and further pilots planned for Scotland, as well as a number of other cities around the world. Each pilot varies with respect to eligibility to certain groups, the amounts of sustenance allowances, and where the funding for the UBI comes from. A UBI-based tax benefit system responds automatically as people find themselves in and out of work or change their hours, as well as providing security for people working minimum hours, making their lives a little less precarious. It is believed that universal basic income would increase the financial incentives to find work and would lead to better matching of workers to allow people the time to retrain without the fear of no financial support. A well-funded UBI would redistribute more resources at a time when we see more and more people afraid of losing their job and the increase in less secure forms of work. Madam Mayor, Cambridge is a radical city and we have one of the biggest levels of inequalities in our country. We are calling on the next Labour government and John MacDonald as our next Chancellor to ensure that Cambridge is chosen as one of the pilot areas for universal basic income. We are also calling on the current government to match the Shadow Chancellor's pledge now and ensure Cambridge is considered for this pilot. Finally, we are calling on our local MPs to do the same. Madam Mayor, we believe that such a radical and forward-thinking policy will be well received by all Cambridge constituents, as it's essentially based on raising people's quality of life, raising people's opportunity to retrain and reskill without the fear of losing their livelihood. Cambridge Labour City Councillors are committed to creating an equal and fairer society for many here in Cambridge. An evident example of this is our policies on our anti-poverty strategy and the living wage. This motion furthermore adds to our commitment to eradicate poverty from our city. Universal basic income will reduce pressures on families, Madam Mayor. which have resulted from the rollout of universal credit. A welfare system which has been called out several times for its failures. This is a radical forward-thinking proposal for a radical forward-thinking city. And I urge you to support this motion. Thank you, Madam Mayor.
Councillor Totello, would you like to speak now or reserve your right?
I reserve my right.
Okay. Okay, you've got 5 minutes. All right. Okay, is there any debate? Councillor Vick.
Thanks, Madam Mayor. The place that I would tend to go on a subject like this for a view is the Joseph Rowntree Foundation, which is, as many members will know, a social research organisation with an impeccable reputation and record on anti-poverty matters. And what I found there on this, when I looked for it, was a rather contrary view to the one expressed in Councillor McQueen's motion. And I'd quote, it is not affordable, unpalatable to most of the public because of its money for nothing tag, and perhaps most importantly, it increases poverty unless modified beyond recognition. It fails to deal with the higher needs that many have because of rent, childcare, children or disabilities. These are not my views, this is what I'm quoting from the Joseph Rowntree Foundation. The Foundation also points out that the most recent major trial of this in Finland has been aborted. At best, there are mixed views about UBI amongst serious professionals in the field and based on the variety of different types of outcome that have happened when it's been tried. So I am surprised that Labour members would want to cheerlead an adventure into UBI, and in particular would want to risk imposing it on our city, even before there has been an extensive effort to promote good public understanding and hold a public debate about it. There are profound and widespread implications for the whole population from anything resembling a meaningful version of UBI, and I don't think we are even close to trying it out on people. Members on this side share support for many of the desirable outcomes that Councillor McQueen and others talk about in relation to UBI, and we certainly are not opposed to innovation. If we did get to the stage of a trial of UBI, I don't think it would be good research to just allocate a trial to a place where a council passed a motion about it. Trials of this sort are serious business and would need to conform to sensible representative sampling conditions defined by research statisticians. And it's clear that Cambridge would love to talk about a trial. There are lots of us who would love to do that. But with its extremely low level of unemployment, it may or may not represent good sampling conditions. And I don't think we are, frankly, in the best place to judge. I think much more important for us, as the Joseph Rowntree Foundation itself says, is to make significant and radical improvements to the welfare benefit system that we have got, which has frankly been emasculated since 2015 by the massive cuts that were made
Councillor,
in
you're
various
going over your
benefits.
time. Thank you. Councillor Moore?
Thank you, Chair. I just very quickly like to say that I support this motion, not just for all the things that Councillor McQueen has said, but also if we are going to solve the climate emergency, we need drastic change to the way that we live, and work will be an important part of that. There have been a lot of recommendations that we should move to a 4-day week. I do not see how we're going to do that under the current system. This would enable people to have enough money to live. They would then perhaps not need to keep working, keep pushing with services, buying things, encouraging others to buy things that actually we don't need. We need a drastic change, and I support this motion. I would also just say, although we do have low levels of unemployment, we're a very unequal city. So we do have people who are employed, but maybe they don't get to see their children very often because they're working 3 jobs to be able to afford to live in this city. And maybe one of those or 2 of those jobs actually is creating more consumption that damages the planet. So this would enable people to step back, perhaps have a slower life, be able to afford things and save the planet.
Councillor Hipkin?
Well, Councillor McQueen read her speech, and it was animated and lively and interesting. I also have had friendly representations from fellow councillors. So I unreservedly withdraw the remarks which I made about reading speeches. If that is what is required, who am I to argue? But I do ask people who read speeches to try and animate them, try and make the word live rather than sound dead. With respect to this particular... And you come along with all these obscenities written on your T-shirts. Anyway,
can you address it to Madam Mayor?
It's worse than... I'm being distracted here. It seems to me that the big scourge in our society is inequality. Britain is one of the most unequal societies in the world. With that, we share, with that title we share with the United States of America. I think that socialists, and there are still some of them around, that they should be arguing not for a universal wage, equal wage to everyone, even those who don't need it. They should be arguing, as they traditionally have argued, for the redistribution of wealth away from the rich and given to the poor and to the less well-off in ways in which they are supported and nourished as members of society. So I respect the sentiments here, and because this experiment has been tried in Finland, a country I very much admire, and a place where, they are, in terms of education and social life and so on, way ahead of Britain. This is one of the features which the Finns have gone in for, and I think it's something that the problem with getting in touch with John McDonnell is that Labour is full of good ideas about changing this society. But the prospects under the present leadership of a Labour government coming into being are so low that I think we must regard Labour as being a betrayal of its own ideals.
Thank you. Councillor Green.
Thank you. Thank you so much to Councillor McQueen for bringing this motion, and I just wanted to add a couple of things to the debate after watching some videos on YouTube, because it was a new subject to me. I didn't know too much about it, so thank you for bringing it to our attention. So just for interest, there are other schemes. There's one in India, and that's been shown to be very successful, which has involved thousands of people. The video that I watched, which was a quite high-level debate by experts in the field, said that it involved tens of thousands of people. So it has been proven to work. Other things that they said in support of this idea are, there's a bit of distrust around things like benefits and the way that some people can be unfairly assessed for benefits, the things like the universal credit, what was PIP and so on. And this sort of idea that perhaps the system could be corrupt, and corruption was a big argument that proponents of this system said are in its favour, because there's no corruption involved if everybody gets the same. other things which are in its favour are to do with the way that it encourages people out of this pitfall whereby they don't want to try and get a job because they would be worse off, or the fear that if they try and get into training or an apprenticeship or some other kind of low-paid job, that they would be worse off. And so it actually has been shown to improve people's quality of life, yes, but also reduce the burden on the state in terms of how much we pay out. So I think we definitely should be looking at this. We definitely should be putting ourselves forward as a pilot. Like Councillor McQueen says, we're a very good place to do that because we have got these problems with inequality, the most unequal city in Western Europe. You know, according to Newsnight that was on a couple of weeks ago, and largely because we've got such a high level of high income in this city, high earners. So let's see those high earners contribute. Let's give people a leg up. Let's deploy some radical policies. Let's see what a Labour government can do, and let's be part of the solution.
Councillor Davey?
I would urge you to support Councillor McQueen's motion. Universal basic income could offer a genuine opportunity to tackle the inequality that sadly is so endemic within our city. Why? Because it offers psychological and practical security to all. It's enough, when implemented properly, to prevent destitution, but not enough to preclude people seeking work. Pilots and trials across the world appear to indicate that this is valuable and worth following. Particularly interesting is a pilot that was undertaken in the City of London, whereby a charity called Broadway ran universal basic income with rough sleepers. A year on, 9 of the 11 people involved were in work and off the streets. There are lots of examples of organisations that are doubtful of this. There are also equally lots of organisations that indicate that it might work. The Royal Society of Arts might be an alternative to the Joseph Rowntree Foundation. A pilot is a pilot, and it's there to be learned from. I would therefore urge people to support Councillor McQueen's motion. Thank you.
Councillor Ashton?
Thank you, Madam Mayor. We're always being accused on this side of not trying to help out those in need. And here we have a perfect example of a system that could help those in need. It was interesting, Councillor Bigg pointed out, you know, let's look at the Rowntree Foundation because this is where we go to find out what we need. It was interesting, he didn't quote the fact that the Rowntree Foundation weren't keen on bedroom tax, but that didn't stop the Lib Dems agreeing to one and making people in poverty and homeless.
Councillor Smith?
Thank you. As a historian who studied the history of development and social policy, I also tend to go for the Joseph Rowntree Foundation for quite a lot of my information because Joseph Rowntree was so key in developing a lot of the policies that we hold to. And I did read the blog entry that Councillor Bitt was referring to, but I also took a lot of really interesting information from their programme paper. Now, you know, I commission a lot of blogs for work. They're often thought pieces. A programme paper tends to be more rigorous and really represent the views of an organisation. And what's very interesting about this programme paper on a citizen's income is how positive it is about it. And it really highlights a lot of the huge benefits, and I'm just going to quote from a couple of them, because what it really particularly brings up is the benefit of taking people away from the stigma of the current systems, to have an unconditional baseline that avoid a host of disadvantages of existing safety nets that stop the state getting closely involved in people's lives in ways that can interfere with human dignity and potentially create barriers to people by bettering themselves through their own efforts. And the unconditional baseline be something that people could build on free from such interference. And the main problem that this particular paper picks up is actually one that I say bring it on, which is we need to have, they raise, it's the practical issue of having a really vibrant public debate about some of the ways in which we would have to address that inequality. Because if some people are getting more, some people are going to have to pay more. And some people are going to complain about that. And that's the major thing that this paper brings out, is simply, this is going to be difficult, people won't like it. And it's raising that as a concern, and understandably, you know, we have to accept the practicalities of that. But I'd say that's an argument I want to have. I want to have that argument with people to explain that everyone has a right to a certain basic level of income. I think the other thing on pilots is it's not always the case that you have a kind of statistically sampled random pilot. I'm involved in piloting a lot of qualifications and training work and all sorts of things that we do in our organisation. And sometimes we go for that approach, and sometimes we often will go for inviting people to participate in pilots, because you want to see initially how something works with a group that's really excited about it. Because if it's not going to work with them, it's unlikely to work with anyone else. So I would say it would be very exciting to be part of that pilot and help inform the debate.
Councillor Somerville?
I certainly support many of the objectives of what has been raised and why this has been proposed. I think the technicalities and the details of it are complex, and I don't pretend to fully understand them. What I would like to say is I think it's fantastic to see the other side showing some radical thinking when it comes to ideas about climate change. And if they could apply that level of radical thinking to the areas that they actually have direct control of, then Councillor Herbert would find my criticisms turning into full-throated support.
Councillor Cantrell?
Madam Mayor, I'm also a reader of documents from the Rowntree Foundation. Just like to highlight for Councillor Smith, page 25, which is the conclusion. It kind of covers all the points that Councillor Bick does cover in his point, just to make it clear to the Chamber. Thank you.
Okay, I've got no other councillors wishing to speak. Councillor Tatala, you've got 5 minutes.
Thank you, Madam. Thank you very much, Councillor Kala, for bringing this motion to the House. This is an issue where it has an impact on every people. When we debate on this issue, we have to relate what we have at this point in time, the current system. Most people of this city and those people who need help and support from the state has almost come to a conclusion that the universal credit is not working for them. The universal credit, in my mind, a system that destroys welfare system of this country. It is not a system that works when people need help and support. The nation was told the new system would put everything together, but it is not the case. On the contrary, it has become more complex for those people who actually need help and support. This motion suggests having a system where all people get help and support from the state when they need help and support. Official figures shows that from 2010, child poverty has increased 500,000. 8 million people are in work and in poverty. And many of middle-income families are facing difficulties. The Trussell Trust says areas where universal trust has been rolled out, food bank use has been increased by 50%. Hundreds of people who are put on universal credit could not pay their bills because their benefit has been cut or delayed. And the system is causing misery to the lives of the people. Look at the way in which child poverty is growing in this country. The concept of universal credit is a concept of food bank state. The concept of universal credit is a concept of food bank state instead of a welfare state. We need a system where safety net for people who need help and support from the state not from food banks. Let me quote, UN reporter states, UN reporter says that the social safety net in this country has been deliberately removed and replaced with a harsh and uncaring ethos. Therefore, Madam Speaker, the universal credit is not sustainable system. We need a system of welfare state, not a food bank state. Therefore, I support this motion. We need to change for the betterment of the poor sections of society. Thank you.
Councillor Robinson, I've got you down here. Did you want to speak? Okay. Okay. It's got it down here. So, Councillor McQueen, you have a right to reply, and you have 3 minutes.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. So my reply to the Trussell report that you just quoted, and I think it was mainly talking about the Finland model. And the reason why the reason why it was pulled after a year was because they were paying a living wage. This pilot is focused on covering the basic costs of living. So people then have that security net if they're not getting those hours of work. So it just gives them peace of mind when it comes to, you know, going for further training, so they have some money in their pocket, they can better themselves. And like Councillor Davey quoted, there's plenty of evidence to suggest that it's enhancing people's lives. And I'm so pleased that he quoted the homeless pilot, because that's something that I hadn't heard of, and that's fantastic. They also had, a couple of years ago, not the same kind of thing, but quite similar, where they paid a certain amount of families a year's living wage all in one go. And I think it was about 5 families, and all of those families went on to opening their own businesses, gaining consistent employment. It works. And I think that, you know, Cambridge is a small city. We can monitor it closely and much more effectively than one of the big cities. And yeah, so I urge everybody to support this motion. And thank you very much, Madam Mayor.
I will now go to the vote. Please, can I see those in favour of the motion? Okay. And those against? And those abstaining? Okay, thank you very much. Okay, we turn to the motion on each hospice, agenda item 6C, to be considered by the Council, which can be found on pages 3 and 4 of the agenda. I call on Councillor Massey to move the motion and understand that Councillor Hadley will second the motion. You have 10 minutes between you.
Thank you very much, Madam Mayor. I'm hoping to get to the bottom of my speech, but I might get a bit emotional, so please forgive me if I do just sit down and shut up. We are very lucky here in Cambridge to be served by the East Anglia Children's Hospital. That's based in Milton, just outside the city. Each provides much needed care and support to many families in the city and around East Anglia in general. They currently care for 371 children and young people, and 385 family members that receive the face-to-face support. As the motion says, the children hospices across the UK have been struggling with increasing costs. There was a 4.5% increase in the amount that children hospices charities spent each year to meet the needs of seriously ill children and their families between 2016 and 17 and 18 and 19. This combination of falling funding and increasing costs is hitting our most vulnerable children and their families. A children's hospice in Birmingham has already announced proposals to close and is citing the uncertainty over funding as one of the deciding factors. Before everybody panics, we are lucky that here in Cambridge, the hospices in our region are not under any current threat of closure, but it is simply not sustainable to expect specialist children's palliative care services provided by children's hospices to be funded by charity of generosity of the public. The care that children's hospices like each provides is so important to the well-being of so many families. And the hospice's wellbeing team held 1,416 sessions of care in 2017 and 18, and in total in the East Anglia region, 6,514. That's wellbeing sessions not paid for by the NHS or any of our other clinics. They provide care and outreach for families and children who are life limited. And this doesn't actually necessarily mean that these children are terminally ill. It just literally means that they are life limited. They can't achieve whatever else was going to be able to achieve, or they were going to struggle. And when you have a child with complex needs, simply going shopping takes a huge amount of planning, or you don't bother going and you end up getting delivery. Going to a school event with a complex child can be impossible. And the hospices support the whole family, including siblings, and their home, help from home schemes mean that volunteers come into the family home to provide them support so you can go shopping, you can go to the school events, and more importantly, do the ironing that you never get to do, or maybe cook. As you may already know, I lost my youngest son when he was 3 years old in 2013. He had complex disabilities and needs after he was born 16 weeks early. The first time someone spoke to me about a hospice to get respite care was just over his first birthday, and I was really baffled as why on earth they were going to talk to me about putting my child in a hospice, because that's where people go to die, and my child wasn't dying. I didn't really understand then. It was all the other care services they could offer, and the respite and the support. So I just spent 3 years not sleeping. But my experience of children's hospices now is of ours in Milton. And it's wonderful, caring, loving, and a sad experience. The hospice moved my son from intensive care in Addenbrooke's to their hospice in the middle of a huge thunderstorm in an ambulance. It was absolutely thunder, lightning, hailstones, everything. It would actually be 6 years ago today. And we expected it just to be for 2 weeks because we were told that that's all he had. They helped with the transition from the carer fighting, constantly fighting to keep the son alive, to that palliative care, which isn't very easy because you suddenly have to realise that you're not allowed to do those tests anymore. There's no point checking for his oxygen levels because if it's low, you're simply not going to do anything to fix it. You've just got to deal with what you've got to deal with. Best thing was I didn't have to change a nappy. I didn't have to do any of the medicines, and all I could do was the fun stuff, and it was really, really good fun, and the memories are really lovely. And the home-cooked meals were just brilliant and exactly what I needed right at that time. So I don't think I ate properly for all of those years. And as ever, my gorgeous boy surprised us all, because at the end of the 2 weeks, it was pretty clear he wasn't going to go anywhere other than home with me. So within 2 weeks' notice, well, it was days really, they helped arrange for the equipment such as a special wheelchair and bed so that I could bring my boy home. They helped arrange physiotherapy sessions at home and occupational health visits, all within those 2 weeks, none of which we had to rely on the NHS for. 4 weeks later, when the day came, when we knew it was going to be his last, they were also with me, holding my hand and helping with the advice, and finally helped to take my son to the hospice after he passed, and allowed him to remain into his room. The staff are amazing, and we should cherish every single children's hospice that we have. Better and fairer funding is what we are hearing in every sector, but children's hospices have never been funded fairly, and it's time that that was changed. Finally, we do all owe such a huge thank you to the East Anglia Children's Hospice for serving our residents for 30 years. Their anniversary is this August. And if I would, I could say thank you over and over and over again to them. Well, I do, a lot. But I also know that the staff at the hospice will be absolutely thrilled if we could, as a council, send over our appreciation of their amazing work and service to our city. Thank you.
Would Councillor Hadley like to speak now or reserve her right? Okay. Is there a debate? Councillor Pippas?
I think we are blessed to have the Sick Children's Trust at Acon House and to also have the other children's ward in Milton. And I was involved in both of them in my previous capacity as mayor. And I was very impressed by the hard work that the staff is doing. I was impressed by the bravery of those children who have a limited life, and everything we can do to help them, it will be a plus, definitely. And I would like to share with you one mother who was very brave, and she said to me, and I said that before, she said, God gave me my little daughter, and she was like a snowflake in my palm. And I had her for 24 months, and then she melted away. So please, let's support those little snowflakes, and then make their life a bit better. Thank you. Support.
Councillor Somerville?
I don't think, Madam Mayor, that I can underline the importance and of the work that the staff at hospices do better than the speech that, the very moving speech that Councillor Massey has made. So I will say no more than to thank her for that and to say that I think it's lamentable that they are facing any kind of uncertainty, because that uncertainty in their future planning is the last thing they need, and anything we can do, the Council can do to support their work should be done.
Thank you. Councillor McQueen?
Thank you, Madam Mayor, and a really warm thank you to Councillor Massey. That was very, very brave, what you did, very, very touching, and I urge everyone to support this motion. I'm sure they all are going to, you know, to underline the importance of having this service, and thank you for sharing that with us.
Councillor Herbert, did you want to? Are you sure? Okay, so Councillor Massey, you have 3 minutes of reply. Oh, sorry, I forgot Grace. Sorry. Councillor Hadley? 4 minutes 10.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I'm going to read again, I apologise. I'd like to thank Councillor Massey for bringing this motion today and for speaking from the bottom of her heart, highlighting the work of children's hospices, for creating this opportunity to consider the love, support and individual care places like East Anglia Children's Hospices offer. I'd like to draw attention to the outreach work that each does too. A lot of each's work is provided out of the hospice and into people's homes. For example, in 2017-18, 1,416 sessions of care were dedicated to both wellbeing support and help at home, which is a programme where volunteers help with practical tasks like cooking, cleaning and ironing. And Nikki alluded to this kind of care, but it's organised by volunteers. Each have also been very effective at building partnerships with other organisations in the community. For example, the Fitzwilliam Museum, where I work. We have coffee mornings for bereaved families, there are sessions organised with art therapists, and family art activities for siblings of those with complex healthcare needs. And they're amazing, amazing work. I believe we all need to work in our personal, professional and political capacities to raise awareness of this disparity in government between adult and children's hospices, something I wasn't aware of until Nikki brought this motion forward. The fundraising successes of organisations like each should be celebrated and commended, but at the same time, government funding for hospices and fundamental services must be protected and increased. There is little evidence, none, that this government will protect and increase funding. But anything we can do, such as this motion today, we must support and pass. Thank you.
Councillor Massey, you have 3 minutes.
Yes, thank you for mentioning about the difference between the children's hospices and the adult hospices. I'm not saying that adult hospices should get any less. Indeed, all of them need to get more. Adult hospices get, on average, about 33% statutory funding, and children's hospices, on average, get about 15%. Our hospice gets less than, they keep shouting it at me, say less than 18% statutory, and the rest of it is all done by the goodness of the successes of their shops and lots of fundraising activities, of which we've had actually here last year when we lit up the Guildhall in the Each Colours as part of Light Up a Life, which I believe they are doing Light Up a Life again this year. Yes, and we'll be using the Guildhall again, which I get really excited and really happy about. So anything that anyone can do to help them fundraise and indeed volunteer, because most of their work is actually carried out by volunteers, and so I'd encourage people to go and have a chat with them. And finally, I sound like Rosie, finally, finally I wanted just to... Yeah. I've lost my train of thought now. Oh yes, we've been trying for the past year to actually get all of the city councillors to go and visit the hospice, so I will try again this year, but they have to do it on a day where they don't have lots and lots of children for obvious reasons. But I will try again this year, and the invite will be open to all councillors. Thank you.
I will now go to the vote. Please can I see those in favour of the motion? Lovely. Thank you. Okay. Now to agenda 6D, which Councillor Cantrell wishes to alter under 26.1.1 with the consent of the Council. This alteration is published on page 39 of the information pack. Does the Council agree to Councillor Cantrell's alteration? Can we have a vote then, please? Can we have a vote on Councillor Cantrell's alteration? All in favour? Well, I'm just asking because of under the 26.1.
No, I understand, Madam Mayor. Are you asking those in favour of?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah. That's what I said. Yeah. Okay, those against? 25. Any abstentions? Okay. So, Councillor Cantrell, you'll have to read out your motion, which is on page 4, as it is, your original motion.
That's all right. Thank you, Madam Mayor. So, Madam Mayor, as you will see from my original motion, that I was asking the Executive Councillor to pause the process in relation to the Council's proposals on Meadows and Buchan Street. After the deadline for motions, the Council issued a press release 2 hours after the deadline for motions, indicating that they were pausing the process in relation to the proposals for the Meadows and Buchan Street. And also, interestingly, the Executive Councillor then followed up on a response to my letter to him of the 22nd of June, some 2 hours later after the press release. So the original purpose of my motion, Madam Mayor, was to get the Executive Councillor to pause the process and review the scheme, something that he was not prepared to do in housing scrutiny. So my original motion does appear to have had the effect and achieved the goal. And like residents in Arbury and King's Hedges, we should all be opposed to the loss of part of St Albans Wreck, as this is in particular the northern part of the city where there is very little green open space. The council, Madam Mayor, we can huff and puff, but the council has other options. The Executive Councillor for Housing, for example, Madam Mayor, could increase the percentage of council housing on the Ridgeon site. Currently, the council is only delivering 40%. That's the same as any private developer on that site. You could increase the volume of council housing on that site to address the issue. And I also welcome the Executive Councillor for Housing's late commitment to undertake a further full consultation with residents once the revised proposals are published. And I would also like the Executive Councillor this evening, today, in public, to give a commitment to ensure that whatever the outcome of that new public consultation, he will honour that outcome and deliver a scheme that fully reflects that consultation outcome. Now, I have, Madam Mayor, to say that the Meadows scheme is an illustration of how delivering these 500 houses, council houses, has become a dogma for the ruling group, steamrolling through any opposition on anything. It's a dogma. The Meadows schemes highlights the ruling group's double standards. They call for green open space to be kept across the city, such as in Montreal Square. Councillor Bajent is a key champion of that scheme in terms of Montreal Square green space being kept. But they're quite happy, together with their commercial partner in the JV, to actually take protected green open space that the council owns. For me, Madam Mayor, there should be no difference. All green open space across the city should be protected from development. And I hope, Madam Mayor, that at this very late stage, the Executive Councillor will adopt that approach in relation to the Meadows. Thank you, Madam Mayor.
Councillor Cantrell, who's your seconder, please? Councillor Payne. Would you like to speak now, Councillor Payne, or reserve your right?
I'll reserve my right, please, Madam Mayor.
OK, you've got 6 minutes left. So on my list, I've got Councillor Price. So I call
Thank
on
you.
Councillor Johnson.
I'm moving my amendment.
Yeah.
And I propose to amend it because it's quite clear to me that much of what Councillor Cantrell has said is inaccurate and incorrect with respect to the Meadows and Buchan Street projects. His original motion was also missing important information about the scheme, why it is proposed to build 100 badly needed council homes in the north of the city, and what further steps the council would take anyway following the conclusion of the pre-planning application consultation process. The motion, as proposed by Councillor Cantrell, probably intentionally, fails to explain what the initial scheme plans proposed to do with regards to St Albans Rec. It did not mention that at least 85% would be unaffected, that in fact the playing pitches would be improved with better drainage, that the play equipment will be kept, and there will be a number of biodiversity improvements around the ground. The amendment makes this clear. Second, the amendment makes clear that the new community centre proposed to integrate the existing functions of the current Meadows and Buchan Street sites would be an important element to any new development. A modern and sustainable low-carbon building fit to serve the existing and future communities of North Cambridge. Third, the amendment corrects the assertion that the community have not had a proper opportunity to comment on the proposals. We have extensively engaged with local people, 3,500 leaflets delivered, plans featured in Cambridge Matters, 2 consultation events held, an extended consultation period on the issue of open space at St Albans Rec, with a meeting held with representatives of the Friends of St Albans Rec themselves. Furthermore, we said at the outset that we would listen to feedback from the pre-planning application before we submit the plans for formal scrutiny. That is why, and Councillor Cantrell knows this because he refers to the letter that I wrote to him, that we have confirmed there will be further refinement of the Meadows and Buchan Street proposals in order to improve the quality of the design. and make best use of the existing footprints at the meadows, thereby reducing the percentage of open space potentially lost. Once the revised plans are ready, we will engage the public on them, and we anticipate submitting the planning application by the autumn. In any case, Councillor Cantrell is one to speak about consultation exercises. Compare and contrast our approach to how the Liberal Democrats consulted on their housing schemes. As I'm sure many colleagues here will remember, back in 2013 and 14, when residents at Aylesbury Close and Water Lane, many frail and elderly, made it clear they did not want to move. They did not want to move from their homes, but what did Councillor Bick do? What did Councillor Cantrell say? And others who were around at the time? They said, no, you must go. How? So when we talk about consultation exercises, it's a load of old pony. Get off the bandwagon, support the plans, support our redevelopment, and to support the rejuvenation and renaissance of council house building in Cambridge.
Councillor Collis, would you like to speak now or reserve your right?
I'll speak now, Madam Mayor.
Okay.
Thank you.
You have 6 minutes and 30 seconds.
Thank you. I won't need all that. I'm speaking here as a councillor, but also a long-term resident of King's Hedges, someone who's brought up a family in the area and remains a regular user of the REC. Madam Mayor, there are two issues at play here: housing need and access to green space. Both are equally important. As councillors, our task is to achieve an effective balance between the two. We've remained as a group committed throughout these discussions to actively listening to local residents, as emphasised at the most recent meeting of the North Area Committee, where that pledge was restated. The residents we're committed to listening to also include those that we've spoken to who actively welcome and support the development. We need to listen to them too. The decision to delay submitting the planning application to allow for further consultation and officers' efforts to explore reducing the proportion of affected green space on St Albans REC show that they have listened to residents' concerns and their willingness to work with the local community, not against it. As ward councillors in King's Hedges and Arbury, we spend a lot of time knocking on doors in the areas adjacent to the REC. One thing we hear consistently from the North Cambridge community is that they desperately need more housing, and housing that is affordable. These redevelopment schemes will, along with other schemes across the city, in the south as well, not just the north, go a long way towards achieving our target of at least 500 new council homes. My ward colleagues and I regularly talk to families where there are several generations living together in cramped conditions. Family members tell us that they want to remain in the area, where possible, close to their community links and networks and their support systems. The redevelopment of the Meadows site will enable more of them to do this. It will help foster community links, not disrupt them. So I therefore recommend Councillor Johnson's amendment.
Is there any debate? I've got Councillor Price on my list. Councillor Price?
Thank you very much, Madam Mayor. Yeah, sorry, Mark, I will try and leave some for you. Well, I'm speaking against the original motion, disingenuous, bandwagon jumping of the worst kind. In my view, Madam Mayor, Councillor Cantrell was aware of the pause to the proceedings, but yet still pursued this motion. So, with deference, Madam Mayor, to one of my former comrades who was known to say a little bit of history, and a little bit of history is important when we're talking about redevelopment schemes, because I think the party opposite, Madam Mayor, need to understand their history in redevelopment. 25th of October 2012, Madam Mayor, in this very chamber, 9 public speakers came with questions relating to the Lib Dem redevelopment of sites across the city. They included Claire Blair, John Woodhouse, former Mayor of Cambridge, John Murray, tenant representative, and 6 other tenants. Those sites were, as has been mentioned, Water Lane, Aylesbury Close, Colville Road, Campkin Road, Lichfield Road, and every one was complaining about the appalling treatment at the hands of the then ruling group. That public question series was then followed by a motion proposed by me and seconded by Councillor Ashton. This was dealt with by the Executive Councillor at the time, Councillor Smart, with a delete all and insert amendment. You know the type. One of the points we were raising was to recommend radical consultation improvements to ensure that there is a proper and meaningful consultation in line with the Council's agreed Code of Practice on consultation with residents. We were told by that Executive Council that the Council would listen to the residents, but they never did. But she also said that the tenants could not have a veto on the schemes, something Councillor Cantrill seems to think should apply here. This redevelopment, Madam Mayor, this redevelopment, I'll just double my time because I'll keep going, does not involve moving elderly, vulnerable people out of their homes. I've been contacted by many of the objectors and met several face to face. Without exception, their first reason given for objecting was their perceived increase in crime by having council homes. The issue of loss of green space was a secondary thought. One objector to Buchan Street redevelopment, and the 2 sites are linked, actually said in a meeting that he didn't want council housing built near to where people have worked hard to buy their homes. That's the sort of level of debate that is going on out there. Madam Mayor, I find it hard to take when objections to building homes to house those most in need are made by those, and I'm not going to stop, already adequately housed, and in this case, by some whose homes were built controversially on allotment land. A definite case of I'm all right, Jack, pull up the ladder.
Thank you. I've now got Councillor Ashton.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I think I need to script Councillor Ripkin for all the inequities that's gone on. First of all, to say the timing of the pausing of what's going on. A newspaper was held up earlier on at the same time we had a motion. The Evening News, somehow or other, had a pesticide one today when we were having a motion. How amazing that was when we were talking about what's going on. Consultation, when I became a councillor, consultation was my prime concern. And I'm glad to see the Lib Dems have now taken it on board. But I don't think they ever do listen to what consultation means. Green open spaces. There was lovely green open spaces around the bungalows. 18 bungalows where frail and old people lived. There was no concern about getting rid of all that green open space then. Now let's get the houses on. Not for council tenants, we'll have private people moving in. Council land for private people.
Madam Mayor, are we still talking about Councillor Cantrill's motion?
Yes, we are talking about it, yes. We are talking about it. We're talking about green space that was mentioned. That's valuable. We've got lovely green space in Cherry Hinton, and you're happy to build 12,000 homes in it. So don't tell us about green space and what's going on. So, again, we're taking lessons from an opposition here that when they had the chance could have changed this city dramatically. And we've had 5 years now to try and put these things right. And we will continue to put our residents first. And as my Councillor Price said, we do listen to our residents, we do consult with our residents, and we do what is in their best interest.
Councillor Todd-Jones.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Yes, Councillor Cantrill talks about steamrolling proposals through, but I remember well the situation. I remember well the situation in. We're talking Arbury here, because I remember the situation at Dalesford Close when Councillor Smart was Executive Councillor for Housing, and indeed that proposal
Madam Mayor,
was
she's not
steamrollered
here
through.
to defend herself.
That proposal was steamrollered through, absolutely, as Councillor Price has said. We're not steamrolling a proposal through. I've heavily engaged with the residents concerned with this proposal, particularly the Meadows and St Albans Rec. I've engaged with the Friends. I helped to encourage further consultation, a specific stakeholder meeting with the Friends, so that we could discuss the proposals in depth and all their concerns. We're listening very carefully. We're moving to amended schemes and amended proposals and a further consultation period. So it's very rich coming from the Lib Dems accusing us of steamrolling a proposal through when actually we're responding very carefully and listening very carefully to local residents. One of the hardest things I find to talk about with this is expressing that unknown need. Council and others have all talked about the 2,500 plus on the Housing Needs Register. They are voiceless. We have to try and take account strategically of what their needs are. And they cannot speak at meetings because they're not present. But we know that their needs are there and are going to be there in the future. And so we're speaking partly for those voiceless people. These houses are desperately needed. We're trying to find a good balance for this scheme and the existing amenity, and there will be further amended proposals coming forward. So I urge the Council to support the amendments.
Councillor Bajent.
Yeah, thank you, Councillor Cantrell, for mentioning my name, because it sort of woke me up, because it was such a boring tribal speech that you were giving. And it does prove, John, that nearly hoisted by my own petard. It does prove, John, Madam Mayor, that a speech doesn't have to be written down to be delivered in a boring manner. When we talk about Montreal Square and we compare it with what's being spoken of here, I must say that in this development, no homes will be lost, no people will be dragged from their houses unwillingly, and... Sorry? That'll do. Yeah, that'll do.
Thanks, Dave. Councillor Hipkin.
No one can doubt the urgent need in this city for council housing and for the 500 homes that have been promised as a result of the agreement that was made a couple of years ago, largely, if I may say so, to the credit of Councillor Price and fellow members of his party to secure that funding for the 500 homes. And one of the things which I also feel needs to be acknowledged is that in order to build those 500 homes, the council was prepared to acknowledge that it did not have the delivery skills required in order to get that job done efficiently. So what it did was partner up with Hill. Hill is an award-winning development company. It's the company which is building housing in Eddington. The quality of design, the quality of finish in Hill residential homes is unsurpassed. So I think the council was very wise to go into partnership with Hill. It's also important to remember that the council as a quad developer needs to take account of costs. So the question about what percentage should be social housing, the council needs to raise funds in order to finance these homes. And that's why a large allocation must be devoted to market housing. Market housing makes social housing possible. And so I think the council, again, has got the balance just about right with 40%. If you go up to 50 or 60% or whatever you're being urged to do, you're cutting the prospects of surpluses which are required in order to finance the entire scheme. May I end by reminding the council that this will come before the planning committee in due course. And one of the things which is I find deeply disturbing about tonight's debate is that we're taking up hard party positions over a planning matter. There are many members here tonight who are cheering remarks which are being issued by prominent members of this council who will have to arbitrate on these questions when they come before the planning committee. And I would just like to remind them that I think in view of the background in which this matter has been discussed tonight, they should make it perfectly plain when it comes to them to determine this application that they are open-minded.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Dial?
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I just a very short intervention, but I originally spoke to campaigners about this issue at the Albury Carnival. We did have campaigners supporting the Friends of St Albans Rec, even at the the Milton Road Library opening. I've gone and spoken to residents in the area prior to this meeting to understand more of it. I would like to pick up on Councillor Price's comment that the complaints are all about some perceived increase in crime linked to social housing. Not one of the campaigners I've spoken to has raised that issue, and I think it's really a disservice to the campaign against this to suggest that that's what they're talking about. They have other issues that they're trying to press home, and I do think he should withdraw that comment. Thank you.
He won't withdraw it because they were what people have told him.
Councillor Smart.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Forgotten what I was going to say now. So, yeah. No, I've not. No. I think Councillor Hipkin makes a good point, but I'd just like to add to it. So, I think us councillors can be predisposed to an opinion, but we may not be predetermining the opinion. So, as chair of the planning committee, I am not even predisposed, to be honest, but I've certainly not predetermined my opinion on when the item comes to committee. The other two things I was going to say was that when I became councillor in 2014, on the doorstep, I said to a lot of people that I was wanting to be elected to help run a robust administration for Cambridge because the previous administration had made a lot of mistakes and lost a lot of money. So that was why I came to politics in the first place. And what we need to do with the assets we have in North Cambridge is to use them in the best possible way for the residents of this city, and that includes the land. And the outcome of that will be more council housing, which will be a good thing, of course, and also a brand new community centre. So having a new community centre will be good for the people of Cambridge, obviously. So I think all I'd finally say is that I think we just need to put it all into context. There are concerns about the open space, and those have been recognised, that residents have raised, and we will be taking those into account.
Thank you. And I'll just say, Water Lane, Water Lane, Water Lane. Would Councillor Payne like to speak now on reserve?
Madam Mayor, excuse me.
Could you explain those remarks,
Can you explain that remark?
Yes.
I wasn't on
Madam
council.
Mayor, you should be impartial.
And I think this derision of an honorary councillor of this council in Councillor Smart is inappropriate.
Madam Mayor, you should be impartial. You're sitting there. You're not allowed to be political. You're non-political. You are representing all of us. You do not express a political opinion.
Excuse me. I am allowed to speak on things. Yes. Yes, I am. I am allowed to do that. Anyway, we'll get back to the meeting. Otherwise, we'll be here till midnight. Would Councillor Payne like to speak now or reserve her right? Do you want to speak now, Councillor Payne? Okay. No, that's it. You're going to have to speak now.
I'll dig something up, don't worry. Thank you, Madam Mayor. I am very happy actually to have the opportunity to second Councillor Cantrell's motion, mainly to pick up actually on two words which come in the resolutions at the end of the motion and the amendment, which to me seems to be the critical difference that we're wrestling between us in this debate, which is the difference between the motion, which asks the Council to accept and commit to adjust the proposals, and in the amendment, which asks us to acknowledge the input. And I think that there is a critical difference. And the difference there is that acknowledging implies listening to, and I completely agree with Councillor Collis, actually, having spoken to residents on St Albans Rec, actually they do feel they've had the opportunity to share their views. They've really paid testament to Councillor Todd Jones's input and his sympathy and his understanding of them, which has been obviously lovely to hear. But what they also don't feel is that they've had chance to push this development forward. They haven't had chance to have an input which will then be listened to. And that, I think, is the difference here. For this proposal to succeed, it isn't enough just to listen to them and nod and smile and say, oh, how terrible. But actually what we need to do is we need to take the public with us. This is a really critical development, which does aim to achieve the 500 homes. However, it also is about building a community. And I'm really concerned that what will happen if we don't properly engage with the residents of St Albans Rec and that they're not on board with this proposal is that what we'll do is we'll have 500 homes, brilliant, but we'll also have an absolute melting pot where we'll take one community, we'll plonk them in the middle of an existing community who are already predisposed to be quite grumpy about it because they feel they haven't been listened to, because they feel it's been done to them. It's absolutely essential here that we take the existing community with us and they have the opportunity to shape this development. And from my experience of them, actually, they're not opposed to development happening. They just want it to happen in a way which fits with the existing streetscape and with their wishes. And already what we see is the council stepping back from this development. At the Meadows Community Centre, planned refurbishment works have not been completed. There's an underspend. The skate park on St Albans Rec has been sitting damaged and not possible to be used for months and months and months, the campaigners have highlighted. And that is the first step. That's the first erosion of the value of this community, and that's the first symptom of the council putting its council housing over and above its existing residents. The two need to work together, and I think at this point it's for the Executive Council to put the brakes on that erosion, to show that community that actually they are valued, that they can have a role to play in shaping this development to make it work, so we can deliver the housing, but also that we can deliver a community. And that's why I urge you to accept this motion this evening. Thank you.
So, Councillor Johnson, did you want to say anything? No. Councillor Cantrell?
Thank you, Madam Mayor.
You have 3 minutes.
Thank you. I just want to come back on a number of points raised in the debate. So, for example, let's just get the facts right. No one was aware of any revised or pause to the scheme. Nobody on this side was informed by officers. The first I saw was a press release that went out just before midday on Monday, and that was after the closure of motions earlier on in the morning. So I don't know where Councillor Johnson's coming from in relation to the fact that this was all public knowledge, because that certainly wasn't the case. He referenced 85% of the REC will not be impacted by this. 15% will be. 15% will be. And, well, I'll be happy for him to confirm this evening, and I'm sure happy to let him to intervene in my summing up, if he confirms that no green space will be taken in relation to St Albans Rec. Very happy for him to publicly commit that in this meeting now. The other point I would raise is that actually it depends who residents are. It depends who residents are. I've knocked on quite a few doors in Arbury in the last few weeks, and it's interesting. I mean, you may laugh, but there hasn't been much sign of Labour councillors knocking on doors in Arbury in the last few weeks. I recognise that Councillor Todd has been away, so that may be one reason. And to be fair to Councillor Todd, he is the only Labour councillor who actually the residents acknowledge have engaged with them in relation to this issue. 810 signatures can't be run and cannot be laughed at, Councillor Davey. 810 signatures of those local residents who are objecting to the way that this scheme was being steamrolled through. They came to housing and all the Executive Councillor could say, tough, we're getting on with it. At last, the Executive Councillor has paused. At last. It may be late in the day. I welcome his decision to do that. And you have other options. You could increase the amount of council housing at the Ridgeon site. There is no problem of doing that. You could. You could do that quite easily. Why don't you? You could amend the scheme on the Meadows and still deliver the 500. Why don't you? The reason is this has become a dogma. You want to deliver it at all costs, regardless of who gets steamrolled by your process. And in this particular development, Madam Mayor, it's the residents of North Cambridge. And just on Water Lane, Madam Mayor, just on Water Lane, because I think it's very important, we did 3 sets of consultation, as the Madam Mayor did acknowledge in housing scrutiny. And actually, I went and looked at Labour. Labour wanted to veto the scheme. So why don't you practice in power what you proposed in opposition? Thank you.
Okay. We will now go to the vote. Please can I see those in favour of the amendment?
So that's 26.
Those against?
That's 12.
Abstentions?
No,
Okay. And we now go to the vote on the motion as amended. Please can I see those in favour?
26.
Those against? And those abstentions?
That's 12.
Agenda item 7. Members are asked to note the written questions and answers received for this meeting on page 43 and 45 on the information pack. The next meeting of the Council is on the 17th of October 2019. Please can you take your rubbish with you? Good night and a safe journey home.